Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits. I may never have been Ed of the class, but I'm certainly Ed of the Fringe, and that gives you a clue as to what time of year it is, because I've just come back from 10 wonderful days in Edinburgh. It's a beautiful city at any time of year, but it's particularly wonderful at the time of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, which, as I've said before, is the biggest arts festival in the world. There's almost nothing that can't be seen, discussed or enjoyed somewhere in Edinburgh during these wonderful heady days, and as you'll know, it's my favourite time of the year. And therefore, my returning back to my home is my least favourite time of the year, because it means I'm now as far away from next year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe as it's possible to be. But hope is not lost, either for me or for anyone else, because although I'm now back from the Fringe, it's still on. And there are therefore opportunities to see some of the shows that we're going to be discussing in this week's edition of Musical Talk, and of course over the next few weeks as we look at many of the shows in some depth. And for me, it's a chance to remember the happy times I've just enjoyed, talking to directors, assistant directors, musical directors, actors, writers, composers, cabaret artists, and even fellow reviewers. And that's still only a small sample of the number of people that I got to speak to. So a quick shout out at the beginning. Hello to my old friend John Sweeney, and hello to my new friend Ellen Armstrong, both of whom I had the great pleasure of talking to at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe this year. Now, as you probably know, Musical Talk is very nearly 10 years old, and we're only 9 episodes off our 500th episode of Musical Talk since we started in September 2006. It seems quite amazing to me, that. But it also means that this is my 10th Edinburgh Festival Fringe report. I've been going there now for a decade, and decade is pretty much how I now feel. I'm tired, but I'm happy, having come back from a wonderful time. So, let's get down to the business of today. In this episode, as is traditional, you'll be hearing extracts of interviews that I conducted with various people who had shows that I enjoyed at the Fringe. And all of these shows can still be seen, so I'll be giving you details as we go through. But remember, these are only extracts of interviews. Over the next few weeks and months, we'll be hearing them. Some are short, some are long and in-depth. And we'll be discussing everything from Stephen Sondheim all the way through to the newest of the new writing. Because one of the wonderful things about the Edinburgh Festival Fringe is the fact there is so much of that new writing there. It is a real showcase. And delightfully, we've also been given the opportunity to showcase some of the songs from some of these shows. So, extracts of conversations with songs, and of course details on how to see the shows, is very much what's on the bill of fare for today's episode of Musical Talk. Well, we mentioned new writing, so let's start with a particularly good piece of new writing, a wonderful show called Stop the Train. We're going to start, therefore, with a song from that new very strong score by Rick Gard called Stop It, I Like It, and then we'll hear an extract of the interview I conducted with Rick about Stop the Train as we chat about how the show came to be. Let's hear that song from Stop the Train.
1, 2, 3, 4. Baby girl, it's a big, big world and there's many fish in the sea. I'm not trying to roam, but I'm flesh and bone, so you'd better keep your eye on me. I'm not trying to flirt, I'm not trying to hurt, don't even wanna be free. But when I see them walk and I hear them talk, well, that's the end of me. They got bumps and curves just for hors d'oeuvres, and I haven't even mentioned the lips. They've got wild eyes that make you lie and legs right up to their hips. They're from outer space, they're the pharaoh race, and we all know who's in control. But with the lick of their lips and the swing of their hips, well, a man can lose his soul. Stop, 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 stop it, I like it. Why don't you stop, 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 it feels good. It's so wrong, I'm getting excited. Please don't stop, though I know you should. Take Adam and Eve, now Eve won't leave till Adam tastes her wares. When a woman wants, you better say yes, or you better start saying your prayers. In every place there's a pretty face, a tempting variety. but I'm not looking, not available. Please don't tempt me. Stop, 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 stop it, I like it. Why don't you stop, 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 it feels good. It's so wrong, I'm getting excited. Please don't stop, though I know you should. 5'2", eyes blue, skin as smooth as cream. Not to have her a nightmare, but to have her a dream. Eloquent and radiant with 2 first-class degrees, and the kind of hips which fingertips were invented just to tease. She gave me the eye, and I ignored her. She gave me the eye, so I looked away. She gave me the eye, and so I sighed a sigh. I'm weak, and I'm being led astray, astray. Stop, 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 stop it, I like it. Why don't you stop, 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 it feels good. It's so wrong, I'm getting excited. Please don't stop, though I know you should. Dark and dirty, roundabout dirty with 42 on top. She knows to wine and all things fine and likes to dance till you drop. I said I like to sing, she said I like to swing, but I didn't see her moving her feet. Then she stroked my thigh and looked me right in the eye and said something that I can't repeat. Oh, I like it. Stop, 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 it feels good. It's so wrong, I'm getting excited. Oh, please don't stop, though I know you should. Please don't stop, though I know you should.
Well, hello, my name's Rick Gard. I'm from the brand new musical Stop the Train. I am the writer and the producer, first-time producer.
And first time in Edinburgh, I think.
That's right, that's right. I came here as an actor about 10 years ago. Thoroughly enjoyed the experience, but didn't know what I was doing, was making it up as I was going along. And I've always wanted to come back with a piece. Decided I was going to come back this year with a brand new piece, which I've written, my first musical I've written, and I am over the moon with the results so far.
Well, I think you have every right to be, because Stop the Train is a fantastic show. And what's marvellous about it is it's premiering here in Edinburgh, isn't it?
That's right, that's right.
And it feels completely fully formed. I know it is fully formed.
That is music to my ears.
But not every... well, thank you. Well, it was literal music to my ears. Of course, it's a musical. But not all shows arrive in an absolute tip-top sort of super polished state. This is well written, it's well performed, it's well produced. Everything about it is really good.
That's very kind, thank you.
So, let's start with the bare bones for our listeners. Would you care briefly, without giving anything away, of course, because we're lucky to go on tour and come to a theatre near you, give us the sort of the bare bones of the story, if you can.
Oh, Stop the Train is about a group of commuters who are on a train every day. They spend time with each other, probably more time than they do with some of their families, but the idea is they see each other every day, but they never communicate. And we've devised something that happens that makes these people come together, and as a result we get to know all their little idiosyncrasies, their private lives, their secrets, and we show all their lives and their stories in a kind of juxtaposition between that harsh reality and fantasy, and all that comes out in song.
That is a very fair way of putting it, and we'll explore that a little bit more as we go on, if I may. But so, what's the history of it? How did it come about?
My background is in writing music for pop artists. I was an artist myself. I was with Universal for quite a number of years, and I've been working with the same co-writer, a guy called Phil Rice, who I've been working with since I was 17 at college.
Well, Andrew Lloyd Webber has historically done well with someone called Rice, so I don't see why you shouldn't.
Yes, it's good. It's good. So yes, we've been together working for a long time. As I say, we had our own career in that, and we've always talked about musicals. We both loved musicals, but wanted to do something a little bit different, so we talked, and eventually, a couple of years ago, we actually sat down and started writing it. As you said rightly, is premiering here, but we've done what we call workshop shows. So we've done 6 workshop shows where we've done in different areas around where we're from, the northwest of England, and we've put a show on, looked at the reaction from the audience, gone away, rewritten it, change some songs,
Oh,
put
so
some in.
it's a workshop performance rather than a workshop, because some workshops are just with actors, aren't they? And the production and the writers to
So,
sort of
yeah,
line it out in an enclosed environment. But
Exactly.
You were when I say this, I mean it nicely. You were exposing yourself.
Absolutely. I have been known to, yes. So yes, the idea was that there's nothing better than an audience to tell you when you've got it right or run it wrong. So we'd spend a week with the actors, getting it where we thought it was right, put it in front of the audience, and where it drops, we'd cut it out. Where it works well, we'd heighten that. So that's been the process. The actors have given a lot of time to rehearse, and we're very proud of how slick it is.
Yes.
But I'm also very aware, seeing it in front of an Edinburgh audience, what needs to change. Straight away,
you're still learning things.
Straight away, I'm seeing weaknesses that I want to put right from the way they react, because that's what it's all about. It's constant refinement. Somebody told me very early on, you never write a musical, you rewrite it.
Yes.
And it couldn't be more true. And things go out of fashion very quickly, references go out of fashion.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make it as universal as possible. I always had in the back of my mind that because it's based on a city train, I wanted it to be that it could be any city.
Oh, yes.
And that I'm very thankful to say seems to have worked, because I got a gentleman who came up to me yesterday from New York who said, "This reminds me of my trip every day in and my commute." And he said, "This will work. This is it." And he's been in 3 days in a row now to see it. We've only done 4 shows so far, so I'm very pleased.
Card, doesn't he?
I think he will do at this rate. He may get a free ticket if he comes for the whole 2 weeks.
So, historically, in terms of writing, because you performed, which I think gives you a very good grounding for how things structurally work, even if you've just organically learned how to do that. But, forgive me, how do you delineate the work? You have your co-writer.
That's right.
Is it one of these cases where one of you writes the book, one of you writes the songs, one of you writes the lyrics? Are you an organic fusion body?
It really is. That's a perfect way of looking at it. An organic fusion. I like that. I'll use that in the next interview. Thank you. But that's what it is. I mean, we have our penchants for certain things. I love lyrics. I love top line, melody. But at the same time, we do it all between us. And the same with the book. Nothing gets past either of us. We both sign it off, and we both have the input. So it is a very democratic situation, and we've working together for years, and we hardly ever fall out. We just never go forward with something unless we both agree.
Well, that's a very good and democratic way forward as well.
It seems to work.
Got to ask you a couple of questions. I mean, these are nuts and bolts questions in some way, but you were talking about how that you'd be kicking ideas together until you came up with something that made it gel.
Yes.
So it's definitely book first.
No, the idea of the book first. Then we started a few of the songs, and then wrote the book, and then finished the songs, then rewrote the book, then rewrote the songs, then it keep changing.
So once again, it's the organic development kind
Absolutely,
of thing.
absolutely.
Some people will say, well, once I got the book right, that then told me what my plot was and where the nexus points are to put the songs in, etc., etc. But the way you've done it is equally valid in the sense of actually, well, we've changed this, so we then changed that, and then that made us change this.
Yes.
And that's fine too, because there is no textbook way of writing a musical.
No, it's doing a jigsaw in the dark, isn't it? That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. So unless you open the fridge door, you don't get any light at all. So I would like to talk a little bit about the concept of the piece, because this is why I think this show is so successful compared to others of a family of kind of shows to which it could be described to belong to, if I can use a slightly long-winded sentence. There have been over the years, and this is my 10th year in Edinburgh, I love it every year, and of course one of the opportunities for coming a lot is seeing a lot of shows that you might not see, or you may never see again.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter if a show is good or bad, because, for £10 or whatever it is, you can afford to take some chances. It opens and broadens people's horizons, so it's a wonderful thing as a festival. But that also means that I've seen trends and developments, and I don't want to damn this show, because I don't, it's a fantastic show, but what I'm saying is there's a kind of show, I've seen a number of shows which are set on trains or railway platforms,
right,
and have taken, to a degree, the same concept of, you've got a similar group of people who meet on a day-to-day basis because they're commuters, who don't talk. The isolation, how do we break that up? And in most of these shows, and it becomes a little samey after a while, there's no obvious, when I say linking narrative, but there's no facilitator that allows the conversations to take place. So you get this, what I sort of think of as the Tisch School argument, which is that you have someone stands up and tells their story, and then someone else will tell their story, and then someone else will tell their story. And it might be that the plot is clever enough to link those stories in some incidental way, and so it sort of meshes into a fugue of stories. That's the theory, I think. It doesn't always work as smartly, as cleverly as that. And that's a perfectly valid way of doing it. There's a show up here in Edinburgh at the moment. It's not set on a train, but it is for individuals
whose lives intertwine with each other whilst not necessarily connecting directly in most cases, called Ordinary Days. It's actually a very good piece, very well written, beautifully performed, and actually it's I can't criticise it, except I've seen the kind of thing so often. What I really like about Stop the Train is you have found a much cleverer way of making this work. So you have found, without revealing what it is, a kind of narrative character who fits in within the world it works. So he's not, like any drama, something unusual happens at the beginning, and then the reactions to it take place as a result. So this character, and he is a character, and he's an enigmatic character. You really don't know what his motivations are. You really don't know if he means what he says, and he turns on the sixpence as well. So he's got a lovely little bit of edge. So he provides for jeopardy, if you like.
Yes.
So you've come up with this clever framework device, which then allows the characters to explain who they are and interact and things like that. And I found that so much more satisfying than just it's my turn now, I'll stand up. So
that's good to know.
Well, no, but forgive me. You've given a perfectly acceptable canon of musicals a beautiful new twist, and it needed it, frankly, because if it had just been it's now my turn to stand up and sing my want song, I would have said very nicely done, but not as good as it is as it actually is.
Well, I can't say that is entirely by device. Now, there's one thing that I will say, it may put me in a bad light, but I'm going to be honest as well.
Thank you.
Is that Phil and I, my co-writer, we purposely stayed away from musicals and plays. We're not well versed in this form at all, and we wanted to make sure that we came from it from another point of view. So if we've broken theatre conventions, it's not being clever. It's because we're not knowledgeable.
Well, no, I don't think you've broken theatre conventions. It is just. It's not a convention. It's just that it has become there is a particular kind of musical that feels like this.
It's become a style of that. Okay.
And I love the fact that there are, and it's not just this musical. There are other musicals where people have said, "Well, this is my first musical." I think not being trapped by the tradition or the conventions, or even just the fashion. Let's be honest, because like all forms of drama, there are fashions and fads in musical theatre as there is in everything else.
Absolutely.
Is rather wonderful. You came to your plot independently, and you independently saw what the problem might be if you did it in one way, and you overcame that. And I think that's, forgive me, this is all positive. Everything
well, no,
it's
good.
Wonderful
really to hear, because, as I say, because we're new to this genre and we're really enjoying it. We take, the goal is to get it right.
Yes.
And I don't care where the criticism, be it destructive or constructive, comes from, as long as the final goal is something that entertains everybody. This is a process for me, and in our minds, if we thought for any minute we've reached that goal, then we're fools. We have a long way to go. It's shining, it's honing.
You're certainly at the top of the staircase, so if you don't mind me saying,
That's good to hear.
Say that.
Musical talk. Well, that was the very charming Rick Gard. And if you want to see Stop the Train, the musical, with an exclamation mark I notice on the posters, it's on at 3:40 every day at Paradise at St Augustine's. It lasts for an hour and 30 minutes, and it's on until the 28th of August. I gave it 5 stars and called it a wonderful, engaging delight. And from one delight to another, Stop the Train is a hugely contemporary piece. So is our next piece of new writing. It's a contemporary show, but it's about an Edwardian aristocrat who transgressed the social norms of his period. It's an amazing show, poignant and clever, called How to Win Against History. And I caught up with an old friend of this programme, Josh Clark, who's a reviewer for Broadway Baby, to talk about this show, which was his pick of the Fringe. Musical talk.
How to Win Against History.
Yes.
Would you care briefly to describe the show?
Yes, I can do. And I'll just start off by saying that actually this year it's been, for me, the pick of the Fringe entirely, musical theatre or just regular theatre. It's one that I gave a rare 5-star review to.
Good lord.
But I could well have given it 6. I thought it was so good. So, a brief synopsis. It uses some historical material, although some material that you'd really have to dig deep to find, about a guy called Henry Paget, who lived around the turn of the century, late 1800s, I believe, who was the 5th Marquis or Earl of Anglesey. Marquis, wasn't it? Yeah, 5th Marquis of Anglesey. So a grandly titled fellow who came into the family wealth and promptly squandered all of it, I think within 5 or 6 years, living what they call in the show a rather fabulous life, full of sequins, if his costume's anything to go by, and was a cross-dresser, unusual for the time. So, the
and
piece,
a heavy implication that he was a gay man.
yeah, despite having his wife, although that was more of a...
Yes, well, Oscar Wilde managed that one as well.
Exactly,
So.
it's more of an arrangement of convenience for both parties there, wasn't it? And I suppose it's really a sort of biopic or bio-theatre piece, bioplay.
Bioact.
Bioact, of this very interesting figure.
Yeah, now I agree with you. I think it was a remarkable piece, and in its way is really exploring what it is to transgress society's rules, particularly at periods that we would now look back on as fairly regressive, and being yourself. It's a message that's been up here a lot, actually, in a lot of shows I've seen this year. The two themes which are coming out are be yourself and carpe diem, get on with it. And this one certainly is in the be yourself mode.
Yeah.
So, as you quite rightly say, he lives the kind of life which anyone who knows anything about British history would be aware of from the beginning, i.e. he's an aristocrat, he goes to Eton and hates it, fags and all that kind of stuff, which is, for people who don't know the British argot, is to sort of, when junior members of the school sort of act as servants to the senior members of the school. Let's just clear that up. But he very quickly realises that's not for him, and his true self keeps coming through. And as you say, he inherits so young this remarkable wealth. But then it's about, yes, as you say, it's doing what he can to be who he is. There's a beautiful framing device in the piece, isn't there? That his sort of best friend is an actor that he hires to help him put on his theatricals, because that's what he's all about. Spending a lot of money and putting on shows, and nobody comes. But he takes them on tour. In fact, they say if the mountain won't come to Muhammad, Muhammad must go to the mountain.
Yes, they eventually got to that, didn't they?
Yes.
There's a bit of a running gag about that one. And yeah, as you say, his friend is there, and he's almost, even though he goes along with all of the plans and routes, he's almost the voice of reality, isn't he, in the corner of this figure that is there trying to ground the Marquis, even though he's not really successful in doing so.
Well, actually, yes, I suppose because the character, he's a kind of fruity actor, isn't he? I don't think he's not portrayed as being a good actor, if I may say. I mean, the actor playing him is excellent, but he's not playing a good actor. Yeah. And actually, at one level, you can see that almost as a bridging character, because he has the true business aspect of a businessman, which is what show business is. But also, he has the other foot in the camp of the artifice of show business, particularly at the fruitier end of it. So he knows how to straddle reality and make-believe in the way that the Marquis actually doesn't. And indeed, by the time he's doing avant-garde dance in Berlin, a bit later on in the piece, you sort of get the impression that the Marquis is completely... He's so far being himself and so far transgressed from society, but he hasn't even got one foot left in the camp. Wearing a jacket is for him, a gentleman's tweed jacket is for him painful almost. So he's complete. He's like a hot air balloon, which is glorious, but has disappeared into the firmament so completely, never to be seen again. Or so it seems to me. Yeah,
he's really become a complete caricature of himself, hasn't he? And it's as though he's taken on certain characteristics or even affectations at a younger age, which have then just grown and grown, and he perhaps himself has come to find it difficult to separate his true self from almost the character that his life has become.
Yes, you're right, it is partly about image. I suppose the question is, how sincere is the Marquis in being who he is? Because there is towards the end of his life, by which time he's bankrupt and he's living in exile in Monte Carlo, there's a sort of an interview with, I think it's sort of a Grub Street Daily Mail journalist of the worst kind. Well, that's at least how it's portrayed, rather amusingly, I must say, whereby he pretends to be, and I'm putting speech marks around this, normal. That's where he puts on his tweed jacket, and through fourth wall breaking aside to the audience, he makes it plain he hates it, but he's doing it in order to develop some kind of... Well, is it to rehabilitate his own reputation, or is it to give himself some kind of armour to protect himself?
With that little device of the newspaper, it's the image that he thinks he is expected to put across, isn't it, almost? And that he's perhaps fearful of what other people would say or think if he were to put himself out there in quite such a public way as being who he wants to be.
And who he wants to be, or who he actually is. I think that's the other question. I'm still pondering that one myself as well. I think we need to put this in the context of the title, though. How to Win Against History. He has essentially been shunned by society. He's rich enough to ignore society, and he does, until the money runs out, and then society has its way with him, if you like. And when he dies young at 29, I think it is, the family burn almost every record of him. There's almost nothing left to history of him. He leaves no footprints in the sand except one extremely sneering obituary, which is quoted in full. And the actor playing him is such a sort of gentle soul, or certainly playing him as a gentle soul, and so he reads out the obituary, which really is a horrible one about him. And he says, well, there is that. That is my epitaph. But then but through the play, you get to see that he's living life the way we assume he wants to live life. And then as he dies, isn't it? He has this kind of death on his own terms. And he says, this is how to win against history. I sort of won against history. Yeah. Because at least he died the man he was, rather than the man he was being required to be. Did that work for you?
It sort of did, because I think it is there just at the end that we do see this fragility in his character, and almost this first element of self-doubt about who he is, because just as he's saying, I almost won, there's this really strong repetition of, I was a cross-dresser, I am a cross-dresser, and it's that element that really came to the fore right at the end, wasn't it? Much apart from all of anything else that he did. And so perhaps there's something about, well, as you say, it's almost his sexuality is the key thing there, rather aside from how he presents that.
Musical talk. There we are, the always charming, always lovely Josh Clark. And he and I had a good chat, as we always do, about some of the many shows that we saw and had really enjoyed. Something to look forward to in the next few weeks here on Musical Talk. But How to Win Against History is really garnering praise and a lot of word of mouth. It's starting to sell out as well, so if you want to go and see it, you still can, but you might have to look for tickets. Go to the Ed Fringe website for tickets for this show and indeed all the others we're going to be discussing today. It's on at 5:40 in the afternoon for an hour and 5 minutes at the Assembly George Square Theatre until the 28th of August. And as you heard, it was the pick of the Fringe for Josh Clark, who reviews for Broadway Baby. I also delighted in it, and I gave it 5 stars and said, poignancy and comedy combined to perfection in this gentle gem, a must-see. So that's How to Win Against History. 2 fantastic shows already so far, and 5 stars awarded in each case, which is the maximum given in the Edinburgh rating system. Now, as you heard in that conversation, we touched very briefly on the concept of show business and theatre being a business. And that's something that's going to come up again and again, here and there, in the conversations that you hear either today or in their full-length version when broadcast in the future. But it comes up in this next conversation. I caught up with Kieran Walsh, who's a composer in his own right, and now also a fully trained actor, who's appearing in 2 out of the 3 shows put on by the Royal Scottish Conservatoire this summer at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe. What the Conservatoire tends to do is put on a big Broadway show, quite often a premiere for Scotland, and then commission 2 pieces of new writing. I caught 2 of them, The Big Show, which was 9 to 5, the Dolly Parton musical set in 1979, and also new writing called Confessions of a Justified Songwriter. And, as I say, I had the pleasure of discussing both with Kieran Walsh. So let's hear his thoughts on the score of 9 to 5 and how the plot of Confessions came about from the real world of professional songwriting. Musical talk. Tell me about the score of 9 to 5.
The score's cracking.
Obviously it's Dolly Parton.
Oh, yes. So the bass layer is Dolly Parton. It's a series of songs, obviously 9 to 5.
Which was an enormous hit at the time in the hit parade regardless.
Exactly, and that was mostly, that was partly due to the popularity of the film, for which it was, I'm not sure if it was written for the film or produced with the film, but it came out at the same time, so they helped each other. And so the whole score is inflected with this kind of jazzy, folksy, country feel to it, and they use that motif throughout the kind of dun, 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 throughout the whole score.
It's smuggled into quite a lot of songs, which helps actually give you an integrated score in some senses.
And I think just to give you a bit more detail on the score, it was arranged and orchestrated by Stephen Oremus, who did Wild Party, Wicked.
Oh, right.
And he's done lots of things. He's basically...
They don't all have to begin with W, though.
Oh, absolutely, no. But he's Broadway's man for hire at the moment. And He's fantastic.
He's a known talent, yeah.
Yeah, he finds a really interesting way to fuse quite an extensive range of jazz styles with the classic musical theatre sentiment of making a point. Not park and bark necessarily, with the exception of the song Get Out and Stay Out, for those who know the musical, where she really is making a point and she sings and belts. And yeah, I think it's just one of those interesting things where it's quite a complex score in that sense, but it's simple enough that you can go on a journey with it and it just services the plot perfectly. I really like it. It's good fun.
There's one song that particularly stands out to me because it's the inverse of the song 9 to 5, actually, which is sung by Roz, who's a bit of sort of a comic villainess. Yes, exactly. It's because it's a literal inverse in the sense that 9 to 5 is all about hating the hours you're at work, and her hours that she doesn't like are the ones when she's away from work. And it's a very short song, and I just thought it was very subtle and clever. It's a very obvious thing to do, just inverse a song. But actually, I really liked that because suddenly it also gave that character, who's a bit of a caricature, you know, she's in love with you and your character. She's a sort of, she's a very odd, devoted, loyal character in a way that perhaps she shouldn't be. But she sings this, it's plaintive, it sort of actually gives her a bit of depth, which I think is not necessarily there in the narrative. So I like that particularly. There is a danger, of course, when everything, particularly country, which is not something that's often featured in musical theatre, when everything is country-ish. It's not all country, but it's country-ish, and fused in that Dolly Parton-y way, of course it is. It can begin to sound a little bit similar, because there is something about that genre which is so distinctive.
I would say, though, that for this score, there is an element of similarity throughout it when you recognise bits coming back, and it has that pop inflection, that country sort of yodel, if you like, throughout it. But that's also because, you have the character of Dora Lee, who literally represents Dolly Parton herself on stage singing.
Dolly Parton more or less says so in her recorded inserts at the beginning, doesn't she?
Yes. And the thing is, like, it could have that element of sameness, if you like, but I mean, take Bright Star, which has just opened up on Broadway. That uses a hell of a lot of country influence, and it's Steve Martin wrote the book and score, I think.
Broadway's becoming a much broader canvas anyway, but I suspect in the 80s it was still
oh yes,
this was quite,
I mean, Sondheim was the one to really break boundaries back in the 80s.
But in terms of using different genre in, breaking Broadway out into sort of genre like country, I'm sure it had been done before, but this is sort of, if you like, the breakthrough, it seems to me, or so I understand. Yeah. But, this is the one that came along and was the big success. Now, this isn't the only show you're in, however, is it? Because...
No, it's not. Oh, just to finish on this,
yes.
We've had several 5-star reviews and 4-star reviews, and it's
very good.
It's been really well received, and generally the overwhelming feedback that we've had is that as a company, there is a hell of a lot of research gone on. I can obviously back this up, given that we did do a lot of research into who the characters were, but every person on stage has an absolute reason to be there. They have relationships, and you can see the life on the stage, which is more than just react to what's going on with the leads, and it has that vivacious life to it.
It has the bustle of an office as well, and bearing in mind a lot of it is set in an office.
The choreography by Paul Smethurst, it sort of really reflects that, actually, and the set, which is just absolutely brilliant, and it really encapsulates that idea of just a busy office with no time.
I think I can say it looks like a series of cupboards and storage facilities, but which then can cleverly it's sufficiently modular that you can take elements out of it and build parts of the set with it, which is rather lovely.
Which is rather fun. So the other show.
Yes, the other show, which you're also featuring in a significant role in.
Oh, well, I'd say sort of it's fairly equal footing, really.
Oh, yes, it's an ensemble piece.
Yes.
But, everyone has a chance to shine, I think, in that sense. And this is Confessions of a Justified Songwriter?
Yes, so it's a part devised piece, partly in the sense that we've been working with John and Jerry Keelty, who famously wrote Wasted Love, which won several awards back in 2011 at the Fringe.
And indeed, they've written various other new writing shows for the Royal Scottish Conservatoire and its predecessor name.
Yes, so they are Royal Scottish... No.
You were the Academy previously.
RSAMD, Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama, that's the one. But yes, no, they have a close relationship with Andrew Panton, who is our director in residence, and basically runs the whole course of Masters. And so he has directed this piece. And so it has this feeling of a devised piece, which is that from the start, we workshopped ideas and we got off the ground. We had the songs came in, little bits at a time actually, and a kind of loose idea of what the plot could be, and then we built it into something much more throughout, as devising always is. But then obviously the script came through, and it was all based on these workshopped moments and these little tableaus that we put forward as character models. So I think what's really interesting about it is that it explores the kind of underexplored, seedy belly of the industry in pop. When usually, sort of, you talk about the pop artist and what they get up to, it's all about what goes on behind the scenes of the songwriters, the top line writer, and we actually didn't know much at the time about what exactly it was that goes on behind the scenes. So we got in touch with a couple of people. Firstly, David Snedden, who famously won Fame Academy back in 2002, I believe.
Oh, right.
And he decided, after a brief time in the pop career, that he wanted to transition to songwriting, and that actually just the pop artistry wasn't for him, but he enjoyed writing the songs. And now he writes for people like Newton Faulkner. The Write It On Your Skin album has a couple of songs by him.
Oh, right. So he's making a success in the business.
Absolutely, yeah. And he's worked with quite a few people. And so we took the model of an idea from his life experience, which was that he did a workshop in London, and he basically sort of said, okay, this is how you can write a song, but you can also sort of build it. There are devices that you can use. You can have a hook here, and you can basically make a song that way. And everyone just went mad. And they said, what? This isn't artistry. You're selling your soul. And he said, I'm not selling my soul, I'm selling my songs.
Yeah. It's the business in show business. In fact, there's a song in the musical called In Curtains by...
by Candor and Air.
Yeah, which is, it's a business.
Yeah.
And we have to remember it is. People have got to make a livelihood somehow.
Well, exactly.
But I understand there is a dynamic tension, and indeed a real social tension, between the concept of the integrity of the artist and the creator, whether they be the singer or a songwriter, or both, against the fact that you have actually got to earn a pound.
Exactly. And so the basic plot of the show followed this idea.
Musical talk. Well, that was Kieran Walsh there. It was lovely to catch up again with him in Edinburgh, and I'm delighted to say that he's still composing as well as acting, and we'll be hearing the full interview with him in a few weeks' time. But if you want to see 9 to 5, you certainly can. It's on at 11:30 in the morning at the Assembly Hall, The Mound, a rather grand building. It's directed by Ken Alexander, with set design by Richard Evans, musical direction by Chris Duffy, Marcus Adams and Ian Dugard. And you can see that until the 28th of August. A great way to start your day. And Confessions of a Justified Songwriter is on at 4:05 in the afternoon at Assembly Checkpoint, which is 3 Bristow Place. It lasts for an hour, and it's on the 24th, the 26th and 28th of August. And it runs in repertory with the other new piece of writing called Naughty Cat and the Cheesy Moon, which is a tremendously entertaining family show for kids and adults alike, and has been described as Monty Python and Blackadder-esque. And you can see that at the same time, that's 4:05 in the afternoon, on the 23rd, the 25th and the 27th of August. That show was written and directed by Andy McGregor, with musical direction by Ashley Shoup. As always, the Royal Scottish Conservatoire serving up some delightful and varied pieces. I gave 9 to 5 4 stars and called it a great production of an enjoyable show. And I gave Confessions of a Justified Songwriter another 4 stars and said an enjoyable devised piece with a strong score by the Keelty brothers. Well, we mentioned Monty Python very quickly in passing there, and so now for something completely different. A one-man show about one of the greatest writers of musical theatre who ever lived, Cole Porter. Presented by Michael Griffiths, a well-known singer and performer. I caught up with him to discuss his show called Michael Griffiths' Cole, just after one of his performances. Let's hear from Michael about the man who gave us Night and Day and Begin the Begin. Well, you are here as, and in a show called Cole Porter, one of the great musical theatre writers of the 20th century, a man with a great legacy.
How did the show come about?
Look, the show actually just sort of came out of thin air. I'd been doing a couple of 80s tribute shows, one about Madonna, one about Annie Lennox, and then another biographical show where I just sang lots of like new romantic songs by A-ha and Duran Duran. And I was
far too young for the 80s.
No, I grew up in the 80s.
Well, we all did.
But I started listening to pop music really early. I fell in love with pop music about age 6, and yeah, in fact, Eurythmics were my first love. I remember Sweet Dreams coming out. I would have been, well, I was born in 74, so I would have been not quite, or maybe it was 9. It was about 83, wasn't it? And I was doing a festival in Noosa, and someone that saw me just suggested I should sing Cole Porter. They thought it would suit me, and it happened to be the partner of an author, Anna Godsworthy, and she just said, oh, yeah, I'd write you a Cole Porter show, and it really, that's how it happened. It certainly wasn't my idea.
However, if someone suggests the idea and then offers it to you fully developed, it's rather a splendid option, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, that was an offer too good to refuse. We ended up collaborating pretty much quite closely, and it took 6 months of quite a lot of work, especially for me because I have to play the bloody thing. So it was a lot of finger training because they're complex, especially after playing pop songs. These are far more complex, and I have great respect for them.
Well, I suppose my question is, how far do you go back with Cole Porter?
I'd never sung or played a song of his.
Had you not, really?
No, I'd sung Night and Day only as a singer. I hadn't played it. I didn't know a single song to play. So it was 6 months of like everyday playing.
I'm actually quite surprised at that, because you looked pretty much to the manner born, really.
Well, that's a year of doing this show a lot. It didn't look like that a year ago. A year ago, it was sort of like grit your teeth and smile and just forgive every mistake, of which there were plentiful. But a year on, I'm feeling really confident with the show. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting as well because it's got a lot of sly humour in it as well. I mean, forgive me, there's a lot of references to songs which you don't use either musically. You might have you underscore some of your own dialogue with intros or chorus or refrains from various songs without singing them, and then move into another song. There's also a lot of references to song titles. You know, you mentioned 50,000 Frenchmen Can't Be Wrong, 50 Million Frenchmen Can't Be Wrong, which is one of his really early shows. And, are you finding your audiences are knowledgeable enough to spot that, or is that just for the people who want to spot it?
I think ideally the script will work to the beginner, who it doesn't matter whether they recognise those references, as long as, I mean, the storytelling takes the forefront. But then if you were a Cole Porter diehard fan, and to be honest with you, there were references in there that I don't know because I didn't write it, and my writer has a photographic memory, and so she would have done research, and then, you know, so she's cleverer than me. And as I say, I had to learn these songs, so and I don't know any songs beyond what's in the show to play because I literally have just learned the show.
Oh, you haven't yet got the canon at your fingertips?
No, and people are constantly telling me, oh, do I know this song or that song? And unfortunately I don't, because as I say, I'm new to this. It just feels good and I love it, but I'm certainly not a reference for him. And I don't even know all the references. But hopefully it works on those two levels.
Well, that's good in a way, though. I mean, you don't want to mug the references, so perhaps, if you don't mind me saying, you're not spotting them all is quite helpful, because they are there purely for the people to fish out if they want.
And I approach it, at the risk of sounding really indulgent, but I'm just approaching it as an actor and trying to make sense of the story. So certainly you don't want to, I mean, there are a few references I know, of course, and some of the musical references, but it's really about the sense of it. Even with the songs that you know well, sometimes it's about finding the sense. Like, I never realised Night and Day had this melancholy in it, except, its torment won't be through till you let me spend. Like, there is melancholy, and I kind of, things like that hadn't occurred to me until you really jump into these songs, but they're richer than they first appear.
Musical talk. Well, there we are, another 5-star show there. Michael Griffiths, Cole. A show as stylish as its subject, a joy. And if you want to see that, it's on until the 29th of August at the Assembly George Square Gardens. Well, the next two shows we're going to showcase here on Musical Talk today could not be more different. And yet at the same time, they're both new shows by British composers. But one is a serious, multi-layered, cleverly intricate piece. The other one is zany and hilarious in the extreme. But both are brilliant shows. So, first we're going to hear about Paper Hearts. as we hear an extract of the conversation I had with the delightful Mark Stewart Flynn, and then we'll hear from Craig Mevan and Theo McCabe about the wonderfully titled Apocalypse Cruise Ship Love Affair, from the same people who brought you last year's smash hit Vampire Hospital Waiting Room. And then after that we'll hear a song from that show. But first, here's Mark Stewart Flynn discussing Paper Hearts. Musical talk.
The story is set in a bookshop in England. We don't specify where. And it's about a young man who's the manager of the bookshop, and he's also an aspiring book writer. And he's writing a book, and the bookshop gets into some financial difficulties, and a large corporation come in to take over, and he meets a girl, and they fall deeply in love. And while all this is going on, then we have an alter world, which is the book that he is writing, which is set in Russia. So we've two storylines going on, both love stories, both couples in very different worlds.
And yet, one of the great things about the book is the way that if we say the bookshop is the real life, the way that the real life informs the book as it is being written by our hero, if you like, and that in turn allows those characters to come to life as he writes them,
yes.
And then what they do, if you like, re-informs real life, it seems to me. It seems to me that both of the worlds we're seeing inform each other backwards and forwards, and of course that's also signified even more strongly by having the same actors playing different parts in the piece. And so if you choose, you can also draw parallels between who's being cast in what role, if you like, as in is his manager in the imagination the hero of the Russian story, or is that just something else? These are the questions. I know there's no answers to them. So what's the history of Paper Hearts? Because its Edinburgh iteration is extremely good, extremely sophisticated. So it feels to me like it must have had a little bit of buffing on the way, if you don't mind me saying.
I think it has had a lot of buffing. It started off originally about maybe nearly 5 years ago now, and our writer, Liam O'Rafferty, he just had inspiration one day. He was in his friend's bookshop, and they were sitting down for some event, and he said that he was just sitting in the bookshop, and he just kind of imagined the whole world around him come alive, one of those inspiring, euphoric moments, and all the characters kind of popped in. He said, wouldn't it be great to write a musical that's set in a bookshop, and then it just kind of progressed from there. Now, the script has gone through several rewrites and redrafts, the first drafts of anything. Exactly, yeah. First drafts of anything are never
quite right.
Quite right. And
you do see a few up here in Edinburgh.
You definitely do. And then he got in contact with our director, Tanya, and she helped him then kind of shape the story a little bit more and develop it and kind of hone it in.
So she acted as a dramaturg, essentially?
Essentially, yes, yeah.
And when did you come on board?
I came on board, funny enough, I met Tanya last year at a producers and directors networking event in London.
Which is what it was for then.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. By a lovely man, Chris O'Grady, who hosted. And we just had a chat, and we had mutual friends, and we're similar ages, and I'd never worked on a musical before. And so I was just asking if I could, be of any assistance. And here I am.
But you've never done a musical before, so when you came on board, did you... I suppose the obvious question is, how do you, as a director who has done drama first, and not musicals, if you make that differentiation, how did you approach this? Were there any challenges that you felt particularly big?
Honestly, no. I think that musical theatre and straight theatre are very, very similar.
I do too, as it happens, but people don't.
All the main difference is that when you get to a heightened sense of emotion, that's when the song comes out. And sometimes you really miss that in theatre. I mean, a lot of theatre now is actually using music and using things for those moments, but it's not a musical theatre, it's music drama or drama with music. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, I agree with that, absolutely. Things are becoming much more cinematic as well.
Definitely.
So people are much more used to that. But funnily enough, I was talking only earlier today with a writer, and he was making the observation that actually the advantage of turning something into a musical or making it a musical is that it allows clunkiness, because sometimes a character does need to sort of explain who they are a little bit.
Yes.
And sometimes that can be done very badly, whereas actually a song is an accepted step change which nobody bats an eye at, and it's a really useful dramatic tool.
Yeah, because in our story, we explain who Isaac is in one song.
Yes.
And I don't know how we would have done that in a straight play, because it would have taken a lot more probably time to develop the story, get everyone to get everyone to understand.
The info dump, which is also
like have to read something before you go in. So we get that done very quickly in one song, and it's very entertaining too.
But I'm quite interesting that you sort of joined the project, as it were, when it was already relatively developed. So
yes.
You were sent the script, obviously, to read through. What immediately leapt out of it, from it to you?
Honestly, it wasn't more so the script, is more so I got sent the tracks of the songs.
Oh, right, okay.
And the songs
So
drew me in.
It's the score that brought you in?
The score, the score really brought me in. Because we workshopped, even when we had the text finished, we actually workshopped it for 4 days in rehearsals with the actors, so a lot of things were then also readjusted and changed and developed too.
And because the thing that strikes me, actually I'll ask you the question. How would you describe the score itself in terms of tone and possibly even sort of genre, if that can be said?
It's a collective mix, I think. We don't stick to one genre, obviously, because we're going from modern day England to 1940s Russia. So there's that.
The Second World War as well.
Exactly,
Even more conflict than we might usually have.
Yes, so I think there's kind of something for everyone in the musical, really.
It's got a very strong folk feel, though. Although it's a fusion meal, isn't it? Because there's some good Jewish bits in it, and there's some good sort of folky bits and Russian-y bits. I know there's a huge overlap in some of those areas already, and that's obviously in the Russian piece. And as you say, there's a slightly more jazz feel, perhaps, but it's in the contemporary parts, you would say, it's slightly more. But what it is, it's a very sophisticated. The score is a good reflector of the duality of the piece, it seems to me, because it seems to help delineate the characteristics of the environment we're in each section.
Definitely. Our MD, Dan Jarvis, he did a lot of work on that score, helping Liam orchestrate and arrange and kind of develop it, because it was written originally on just guitar.
Oh, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah, really?
Because it's a little orchestra now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Cello, 2 violins, piano, drums, bass guitar.
Which in Edinburgh terms is actually very impressive, if I may say. But it's got this beautiful tone and sound across the whole thing. It's a very sophisticated score, I think. I remember it almost like a chamber piece. Quite a rich chamber piece. Not bitty in any way, but very sort of rich, covering... I'm going to usually use glue, but when I use the word glue, I don't mean in that kind of sort of blocking it up sense. I mean as in helping to contextualise and recontextualise what we're seeing. And delineate where we are, because actually it can be confusing in narrative terms, can it not? I mean, there's such different locales, but even so, jumping from one to another could confuse an audience.
It could, definitely, but I think we were very lucky with the actor musicians that we obtained in our auditions, because it could have definitely not been as well put together. Like the music again workshopped a little bit, so we added, like, we didn't know that we originally only had one violin player, but then Matthew Atkins, who plays Isaac and Norman, he is also a violin player.
Because he brings one on towards the end.
He brings one on and kind of adds lovely layers in certain songs, and just again the actors during the rehearsals, they themselves were offering suggestions and ideas, and it was just fantastic.
That's the joy of the collaborative nature of art,
it is.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It seems to me that actually when you're putting on a show, and particularly a musical, when you've got extra people that you might not have in a straight drama, I use the terms wrongly but for shorthand,
yes.
You will have orchestra, you will have extra people, but you all have to forge that thing together, and if you're looking in the same direction, you can bring things to the table which perhaps others haven't seen. Well, shall we briefly, because I feel that we probably ought to at least have a gentle stab at describing the plot of the story without giving anything away for our listeners, and some of the characters, because we will need to discuss how they mesh.
Yeah. Do you want to have a go?
Yeah.
Like us talk.
Okay, and best of British luck, by the way.
Yeah. We're on a blues cruise ship, and Captain Blue Fond lost his lover overboard 20 years ago, and is obsessed with getting her back through all manner of utter insanity.
This is sort of Moby Dick and Flying Dutchman kind of stuff, isn't it? Yes.
So his newest idea is
a little lighter, perhaps.
Somewhat, yeah. His newest plan is to drive into these apocalyptic storms to somehow resurrect his lover. And his first mate, Fittles, who is hopelessly in love with him, is just trying to keep him alive. We also have a cruise rep named Hanks Leroy's, who also played by me, who is of an indeterminate accent. He falls in love instantly with a nun on board, and then is just love struck through the show. And we have a few elderly cruise ship hunters just there enjoying the chaos.
So in like a sentence, it's about a captain bringing back his lover by driving into an apocalyptic storm, and everyone else finding love on board at the end of the world. I think was the kind of two-sentence or one-sentence synopsis we tried to tie ourselves down to.
Well, it works very well in that sense, and of course anyone listening will say that sounds absolutely ridiculous. You'd be right. But that's the joy of it. I mean, it's the audience latch on. So the day I was there, it was a sellout. The audience loved it from first to last, as exactly they had with Vampire Hospital Waiting Room. You know, this is a sound show. It's not a weaker second show. I think it's as good as, or even better than, number one. It's certainly more assured, if I may say. I hope you won't mind me saying, because I'd like to talk about the score briefly. I think the songs are actually slightly stronger, in my view. There's forgive me, there's some really lovely conceits. The idea of Hanks, is it Hank or Hanks?
Hanks,
of course. Why would it not be? Hanks falls in love with a nun, and of course there's this it's very funny, but it's a wonderful song about falling in love with only 6 inches of face, because she's in full Wimple mode, isn't she? That's a sentence I wasn't expecting to use this morning. But actually that's a really wonderful song.
Oh, well, thanks.
So, forgive me, how do you come up, where do you find the nexus points for the songs and some of the conceits behind them? Because actually writing a comic song is hard anyway. You've mentioned the rule of three as a concept, and obviously that works in many ways, but it doesn't suit all songs. And actually the score it maintains itself all the way through from beginning to last. There's no duff songs. That's not to say they were last year, but it just feels more accomplished. I'm not trying to damn the previous show, because I thought it was fantastic, although obviously the show with vampires it is damned.
Give away some trade secrets, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but in the last year's show they were just all in the same key, because we wrote them all just like it very, very quickly, and then we realised that allowed us all to just layer them all one on top of each other to create a Les Mis-esque final epic that we just put.
I mean, that wasn't why.
But it just happened to be, and then we kept it like that way.
But that's definitely one of the reasons why the songs are better, because they're not all in C.
And however, they are all at sea. Doing comedy pointing.
There was definitely a huge amount more of like actual musical work that went in.
But also the songs are just, I think, better constructed. And it's been 4 years since I wrote the songs in Vampire. I wasn't even totally expecting to write songs for Vampire. I didn't really know what we were going to create. Like, we were going to be a play with a couple of songs or a full-on musical. But with this, I knew what we were doing, and I've been doing musical theatre writing workshops and stuff like that. So I've just had more time to, a bit more time to think about how to write a song.
And 4 years on the clock makes a difference, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It really
And we all managed to bring a bit more of knowledge about what exactly we were doing, and having seen a few more at West End musicals, just this idea that the love at first sight songs are always absurd, because I saw one recently. I was just struck that they just had only just seen each other and doing absolutely nothing. I thought we had to make fun of how nonsensical it is.
Sometimes accompanied by a ding, almost as the first note, and you think, oh come on, I know what we're getting here. So no, please, with my absolute blessing, go ahead and send those up.
I don't believe in a heaven above, and certainly not an instantaneous love, but the tingling feeling I've got in my chest is either love at first sight or cardiac arrest. No, it's love, I know it. But why? Well, because of her. 'Cause of the way cause she's got those, and she smells like... No, total mind blink. Just realised I don't know anything about this woman. He thinks, do some backing vocals and I'll think of something. And this is 1 in a million, an exceptional case. 'Cause all that I've seen is 6 inches of face.
Ooh, 6 inches of face.
A seductive frown,
2 eyes, 2 lips, a pair of shoes, a huge black gown. 2 ears, 2 cheeks, 1 chin, 1 nose, 1 philtrum, all perfectly in place. Etched into my retina, I think I just fell in love with 6 inches.
6 inches,
6 inches of face.
Ooh, yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
That's right.
Ooh, yeah.
I don't even know her, I don't know her name, but her face is picture perfect and literally a 6x6 frame. And God only knows what's under that dress, or if she's nice, but I could make an educated guess. She's probably got all the key organs, or she wouldn't look so fit. She couldn't walk without legs. She's got arms to a beat, and if she's got 2 legs, then she must have a bum. And if she wasn't a really, really, really nice person, then she wouldn't be a nun. 6 inches,
6 inches,
6 inches of face.
Oh, now you tell him, you tell him. Woo! Yeah, go ahead.
Stop! Wait, stop! Stop the music! Stop the music! You put your fingers down. Hanks, what are you singing about?
Oh, nothing. No, I wasn't singing at all.
I heard you. You were singing about love, weren't you?
He was, sir, and I was doing the backing vocals, but I didn't mean it.
Shut up, Vittles.
Yeah, shut up, Vittles. You know the golden rule, don't you, Hanks?
Yes, sir. No falling in love with
Passengers ever.
Oh, but Kipton, she's
Well,
so
but
nice.
Kipton, she's so nice. Where are you even from, man? You don't know, do you? Enough singing. Everyone out of here. Vittles, let's leave.
Yes, sir.
Six inches of face, not even a nick. Now I believe there's an angel on deck. Struck by Cupid's bow, I'm truly hypnotized. She had me at hello, but the metaphorical hello that her face said to my eyes. 6 inches of
That was the wonderful song 6 Inches of Face from the wonderful show Apocalypse Cruise Ship Love Affair. I gave that 5 stars and called it insanely marvellous and marvellously insane. And do catch it if you can. It's on at 1:30 in the afternoon, and so for many people it will be the first show of the day, and you can see it in the nightclub room in the Gilded Balloon Teviot in Bristow Square. It lasts 50 minutes and it's on until the 29th of August. It's fantastic. I laughed and laughed, and it was one of only 2 shows that I saw in Edinburgh this year twice. It was that enjoyable. And before that we heard Mark Stewart Flynn talking about Paper Hearts. And you can go and see that until the 29th of August as well. That's on at 6:40 in the afternoon for an hour and 15 minutes in the Underbelly Med Quad. 2 very different shows, but well worth seeing. And I also gave Paper Hearts 5 stars as well. A wonderful multi-layered piece, an intricate gem. Go and see both if you can. Very, very different, but both stamped through with the hallmark of excellence. Well, in the Edinburgh Fringe you get nothing if not variety. We just discussed a hilarious show and a multi-layered, intricate show. Well, now we're going to be talking about a meta-theatrical musical. You can probably guess what it is because it has a cult following. It is Title of Show. Technically speaking, Title of Show in square brackets, which is very much the pop culture will eat itself version of Let's Put On a Show. But it really is a good piece, and I saw a fantastic 5-star production of it in the Edinburgh Festival Fringe this year. So I sat down with Harry Hayden Brown, Josh Ward and Jack Reitman for what turned out to be a great conversation, and I can't wait for you to hear the full version of it in the next few weeks, to talk about their production of this curious but tremendous piece, Title of Show, and in particular the score and the story influences. Musical talk.
The score. Now, it seems to me there are several different kinds of songs in the piece. There are the, here's almost a standalone kind of song or a conceit song. You know, for example, there is the song where an awful lot of Broadway flops are referenced. Mm-hmm. And then there are the songs which actually are a little bit more verbatim, if I can use that as a phrase, or realistic. As a musical director, do you treat them all the same? Do you treat them differently? How do you approach the score? And what surprises has the score given you?
So I think, for me, the score is about... I mean, I've done lots of musicals in the past, big orchestras and things. For me, this score in particular is about the dialogue and the words that are in it. I think that's what the whole show is about, getting that across, getting the comedy across in the words. I mean, the music
book
is...
and lyrics are premiere.
Yeah, I think so. And especially when I first started playing through it, I really enjoyed it, and there's catchy moments. But obviously it's not a huge orchestra in Sondheim. But actually, when you do go into it, and people have left saying, the harmonies in this were incredible. And in reality, lots of it is very simple. It's very simple, 4-part sort of music theatre, harmonies and chords. But it comes across, and we've got very, very talented singers, so it comes across incredibly powerfully.
It's
so
a
I
good,
think
rich tone, by the way, coming out.
That's good to hear.
Musically, the singers are supported brilliantly by you, but they bring a very nice fugue of sounds and voices, if that makes sense. I'm not very good at describing these things, but
they blend well.
It comes together really nicely.
Yes, so, I mean, we spent a long time. I say a long time. We had 2 weeks of rehearsal. I think the first 3 or 4 days, we just nailed the music to make sure we had that level of perfection. Basically, that's what we've come up to do, a show that we hope is as perfect as it can be. So we wanted to make sure, at least the music, they come off at the same time. They've all got a lot of diction. But for me, the music is about getting the lyrics across. Although as the show's been going on, you do actually fall in love with it. It's very simple. There's no crazy chords like there are in Sondheim, but there's something beautiful about the way the songs are written, the structure, the melodies are actually really catchy.
They are, yes. And
we're
you feel
singing.
they ought to be.
Yeah, we're singing Nine People's Favourite Things, which is sort of the climax of the show at the end. I find myself singing that all the time, not just because we performed it at basically every single promo event every day this month, but it is incredibly catchy. And the song which Heidi sings at the end, The Way Back to Then, actually, it doesn't come out of nowhere, but the very first number, untitled opening number, is quite comedic, and it takes the mick out of musicals, and they're dancing around like they're in a musical. And I think that sets the tone, and you're expecting it to poke fun of itself and to be meta. And by the time you get to the end and things start falling apart a little bit, and Heidi sings the song about going back to then, it sort of hits you. When I read the script, it hit me as a bit of a surprise. I was getting used to all this humour, and then suddenly you're like, bam, this is quite real and quite emotional.
But it has to have some teeth, doesn't it? Because it's not vicious, but it has some sadness, some it's not without break. It is about a relationship, about a set of friends, actually, and friendship goes through highs and lows, and the stresses of anything like this changes that. So it has to have to continue to be real and have some speech marks worth. I do put speech marks around that. It's got to have some kind of emotional depth.
Yeah.
And what's lovely about it, by the way, is the fact it isn't a love story. That's so refreshing. So refreshing.
True.
It's this and Gilbert and Sullivan, frankly. And even that pretends.
Yes. Well, no, I think also what's lovely to see, it's slightly bizarre, but to see 2 lead male characters who are both openly gay.
Yes.
Who it's not about them being gay. No. They just get, and that's fine. And it's jokingly referenced in one scene. And the irony is that both the actors identify as straight. So it's great to see that it's not being made a thing of.
It's an acting job, isn't it?
Well, exactly, and it's like it's just a part of it's just a trait of the character. Like that's just it. It's not like this is a show about 2 gay guys. Like
no, and it really isn't.
No,
and
not at all.
As you say, if they were straight, it wouldn't actually make any
it wouldn't
real
make any
difference.
difference.
The sensibility might change a little bit in 1 or 2 of the drag queen references.
Yeah, but no, exactly.
You might not be able to start with a shrimp gag, but not so easily, anyways.
Yeah.
We were talking about the music.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess
if you were saying how it reflected the emotional journey of the characters towards the end.
Yeah, it gets more serious. I think that for me, that's what I really enjoy. Is that I feel this is probably quite simplistic, It lulls you into a false sense of security at the beginning, and then it hits you with a really emotional song at the end, which is also written beautifully.
But it's a poignant song. It's not a screaming 11th hour.
No, it's not sad.
I am kind of a.
Poignant is probably a very good word. Reflective.
Yes.
I think as well, that might be overlooked a lot of the time is the underscoring. I think the underscoring really aids in a really subtle way the narrative on stage and the emotion on stage and stuff like that. And also the other thing that I was thinking about was the fact that this whole sort of one piano thing, it could quite easily be seen as quite novelty, but I don't think it is that at all.
It works very well.
And the music is testament, I think, to the work's success.
I didn't feel shortchanged at all. I mean, forgive me, your production is exactly pitched to the environment it's in, the audience it's getting. It just comes across marvellously. Forgive me, you've put a lot of thought into how you're going to do it, and I appreciate. Sorry?
You're forgiven.
Oh, I'm going to have that emblazoned on a t-shirt. But the thought you put in to make this exactly right, and it is exactly right. As an audience member, I went in hoping for the best, and when I came out, I had the best. I had. So, as a production team, you've thought carefully about what you're doing. And you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, how many people come up and just do a show. And you can just, speech marks, do a show. But you can engage with your show, you can think about your show. You can, the conversation you're having with me immediately tells me you've been thinking about these things. And so I can't fault it. Narrative question for you, if I may. Slightly cheeky question, and there is no right or wrong answer. I've said that before, but it's still true. Is title of show merely Merrily We Roll Along in the right order? And Merrily We Roll Along is referenced in the piece, of course, as a flop, in one of the flops. Merrily We Roll Along is a flashback show about a creative partnership which has collapsed, and then it goes back in flashback to their idealistic start about let's put on the show, and they're successfully doing so. It does not follow all the tropes and ticks and moves of that, even if you did Merrily in the chronological order rather than the narrative order. But there is an element of a creative partnership that starts off idealistically, gets a show which is a success, takes it further, a little bit of difficulty in that relationship in terms of stress. Do you see what I'm saying?
No, completely.
Jeff and Hunter would have definitely known, they would have seen parallels. I mean, they're obviously massive music theatre experts, so they must have known. They everything they do, I'm sure they're referencing something. Yes. There's a bit in the score where, I don't know if this is the case, she says Miles, and she's got a blues note, and I jokingly said to my assistant director, maybe he's referencing Miles Davis. It's very specific, but I don't know if they probably didn't use it as a basis, but
I think that their story is quite universal to like theatre creators, people who work in the theatre industry, and that you often get a lot of partnerships. One that puts off the top of my head is Pasek and Paul, two American composers.
What have they done, just for the record?
So they worked on Dogfight.
Right, okay, yes.
Yes, they wrote a number of songs for the TV show Smash, Edges, things like that. So they're contemporary.
Yes, very much of now, aren't they?
Very much now. I think that because to go back to Stephen Sondheim, he always talks about collaboration and how he loves collaborating, and that I really believe that theatre, on the creative team and the cast, but particularly on the creative team, is a collaborative effort. And so there's always going to be tensions and things like that. So when you're then telling a story about creators, especially with a partnership of people who are very good friends and then they decide to collaborate, I think there are going to be parallels with that. Whether it's Merrily Roll Along backwards, I can't answer that.
And it is a slightly facetious point I'm making.
Possibly.
But I thought it was an interesting.
It's interesting. It is interesting, and the fact that they reference it, I think that
we could ask. We've been in Twitter conversations with Jeff and Hunter.
Why? Because there was a bit at the beginning. There was a bit at the beginning when in Untitled Opening Number, which for the people who haven't seen the show, it's
foolish people.
Yeah, foolish people. You should definitely get down. You have to get down at 9:20.
I will be asking.
The Untitled Opening Number is kind of like a bit like a prologue almost, in that it kind of sets up the show, but it's not within the realm of the show. And they reference a bit, and they say these are shapes, and it's very specific, these are shapes on the beat. And I tweeted, I believe it was Jeff, I tweeted him saying, doing a production time to show in Edinburgh, really stumped as to what this could be referenced to. Is this a reference? Is this something that I've missed? And he replied saying, no, this is just
shapes.
This is just 3 shapes.
Oh, really?
And we were like, right.
It is what it says.
Exactly. And I think that's the beauty.
It has hidden shallows.
Well, no, exactly. It's that there's lots in the show that is very, very deep into obscure references,
which they mention in the show as well.
Which they
say it's too obscure.
They let you know that it's postmodern.
Yes, but there's also stuff that they've kind of come up with themselves, and that then has to be celebrated in itself.
Musical talk. Well, we've just heard Josh Ward, Jack Reitman and Harry Hayden Brown there talking about Title of Show, which for me was another 5-star show up in Edinburgh, a spectacular, immaculate must-see production. And we had such a lovely chat on the record, which was then followed by a marvellous chat off the record. 3 very talented young men. I hope very much to hear more from them in the future. And if you want to go and see Title of Show, and I hope that you will, anyone who likes musical theatre really ought to, because it's as informative about the modern way of writing musical theatre as it is entertaining. It's on at C Cubed, which is in Celtic, or Celtic Lodge, I'm not sure which of the pronunciations is correct in this case, which is Brodie's Close in the Lawn Market. It runs to an hour and a half, and is available until the 29th of August. And they also have a sister show going on called Title of Songs, which is not a musical in its own right, but is a cabaret of show tunes put on by the same production team. That also runs until the 29th of August, and you can see that at 6 o'clock in C Soco at the Ibis Hotel, and runs for 55 minutes. Well, now let's hear about a show that I didn't get a chance to see, but an old friend of this programme, the composer and lyricist of musical theatre, Michael Gordon Shapiro, was delighted by. It was his first time at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, and this was one of the shows about which he spoke very positively. It was lovely sitting down with Michael, and also seeing a few shows with him, and you'll be able to hear us talking about those in a later edition of Musical Talk. But let's now hear about one of the shows he liked so very much at this year's festival, The House of Edgar. Musical Talk.
I wonder if you might like to tell me about the Edgar Allan Poe piece, which you raved about when we met a couple of times here across Edinburgh, and you said something delightful. You said you've seen a number of shows, but it was the Edgar Allan Poe show which had really sort of made it all worthwhile for you. So that's high praise. I haven't seen it. Tell me all about it.
Well, I should also add to that I saw the show fairly early in the Fringe, and I'd just gone through a stream of seeing a few shows that were well intended but not that strong, and even though it was only day 2 or so, my morale was taking a little bit of a dip. So I was really delighted to find something that was both moving and intellectually stimulating and musically very compelling and gorgeous. So I may
dragged
have
your average right up.
Exactly. And subsequent to that, I've actually seen a number of shows that I've really liked. So I do not want to make it seem like this was a sole beacon of light in a soul-crushing darkness or anything like that. But I really did like the show, and I did suggest thus that he see it, which he then didn't do. So
I haven't been able to know.
Shows the weight of my opinion around here. The name of the show is The House of Edgar, and it's produced by the Argosy Theatre Company. The show is, here's how I'll describe it. It is both a tribute to Edgar Allan Poe and his works, as well as an original work of art that is of a similar style. And the way that it manages to fulfill both roles is very interesting. The story takes place a few weeks after Poe's death, and we are introduced to one of his colleagues, a man named Rufus Griswold, who we assume is also an author, a fiction author, and he's showing up at Poe's house to take ownership because he is, for reasons which may or may not have been explained, he's the sole heir of Poe's estate. I think it's mentioned that Poe had no family and no loved ones, so maybe he was person number 12 on the list, and he had the jackpot. So he's come to take the keys of the house, and there is a protective executor there, a lawyer, who has to turn over the keys, and he's very reluctant. And it's clear quickly that Griswold is not a fan of Poe. He's actually quite contemptuous of his colleague.
Right.
And he, even as he shows up to take over all of Poe's possessions in his homes, he is basically dissing on Poe's work. He says he's needlessly grim. He just uses synonym after synonym of death. He's obviously our dramatic foil. And
He sounds, if I may make the observation, a bit Poe-faced. Poe-faced means humourless.
Oh, interesting.
I'm so sorry.
If I were more of a worldly person, I would have caught that pun. So he shows up, he is ready to take over everything, and the executor is actually taken aback by this, and the executor is a big fan of Poe, so he begins defending the work. And our visitor says, well, you seem like you're not doing so well financially. How about I'll toss $20 your way if you can give me an example of Poe's work that you think has artistic merit. And this framing device gives us the pretext for the presentation of several of Poe's works, his poems and short stories, obviously abridged because we don't have all day.
Yes.
And each becomes a little episode that is musicalized and dramatically enacted before our eyes. And it's done with such artistry that you do not feel like you're seeing a chopped up, truncated version of The Raven. We go through a succession of these reenactments of Poe's works, and this is the element where it's sort of a tribute. And at first you might think, well, this is really more of a review of Poe, and the story surrounding it is just a framing device to give us an excuse to go all into them. And that turns out not to be true. The outer story turns out to be a legitimate story in its own right, and we follow the journey of Griswold as he runs into several strange circumstances. And here I'm going to be very vague because I do not want to give away any of the twists of the show. But suffice to say that in a Poe-like fashion, a lot of our expectations are suddenly shaken. And some very... I'm going to err on the side of not giving things away. I'll just say
I think that's sensible.
Stuff you didn't expect happens. But the end result, I know that's satisfyingly specific. The end result is it's actually quite moving and gripping, even after we've seen a number of small episodes, each one of which in itself is actually quite moving. The depiction of Annabel Lee is very touching. There's this truncated version of The Raven, which is musically gorgeous. As I speak right now, the melody to the musicalization of The Raven is stuck permanently in my head, and it really needs to be exorcised. I think there is reference to the Telltale Heart and the Pendulum and a few others. So you get this introduction to Poe's work that I think would be compelling for someone who hadn't really experienced any of it, and you also get a real original story at the same time. So all this is very impressive and very earnest and full of the rich detail that really makes a story come to life and feel compelling. And the score is gorgeous. It's...
Yes. How do you make a story? Because it sounds interesting. There's this sense, as you say, there's an anthology and a framework, but the framework is more than a framework, it is a story in its own right. So it's a proper integrated book and narrative.
It is.
One thinks Edgar Allan Poe, one thinks obviously dark, macabre, gothic, shall we say, mid-19th century. I've seen so many potentially interesting historic stories ruined by deeply inappropriate scores. There's nothing wrong with a rock score, but I once saw a very delicate story about the death of the son of Kenneth Grahame, the man who wrote The Wind in the Willows, with the most thumpingly over-the-top rock score, bless it. That every time the orchestra started, you were completely taken out of the story, because it just didn't... that's not to say that an 18th century story, which is a 19th century, but an 18th century story can only be scored by a harpsichord. Obviously, the world is a much broader place than that, but you have to get it right. So I'm really interested to hear what you're going to say on this.
The score is best described as Gothic folk, and it may be because I stole that term from their promotional material, or maybe I came up with it, I don't remember. It is, there's some roots in folk music, maybe more British folk music than American. There's a harmonic element that gives you that sense of Gothic, supernatural things afoot. The score is very accessible, but at the same time very lyrical and beautiful and harmonically sophisticated. There is quite a bit of vocal harmony, which is perfectly performed. The technical execution of the score was impressive in its own right, separate from how much I liked the music. So I'll leave off by saying it's the right blend of feeling emotionally gripping and also a little bit unsettling, as befits the subject matter.
Musical talk. Well, that was Michael Gordon Shapiro. Time spent in his company is always well spent. And of course he brings a composer and lyricist's eye to what he's seen. So delighted was he by the House of Edgar that he actually tracked down the composers and has conducted an interview for them for Musical Talk, and we're all looking forward very much to being able to share that with you. I'm sure it'll be a very insightful discussion about an excellent show. If you want to see the House of Edgar, you can. It got 5 stars from Michael, and it's on at 10:15 in the evening at the Space on the Mile, which is the hotel at the end of Nidri Street. It runs for an hour and 5 minutes and ends on the 27th of August. Catch it while you can. Time for another song, I think. You may remember that last year I had a good and in-depth conversation with the very intelligent, very talented composer and comic writer Lawrence Owen about his one-man show, Cine Musicals. Well, he's back again this year with Cine Musicals High, which, if anything, is even better than last year. I enjoyed it hugely. Lawrence has been kind enough to let us play one of the songs from the album, which is available, and once we've heard that, we'll hear a short extract of the conversation I had with Lawrence about Cine Musicals High, in which we will touch upon the difficulties of writing a similar show in the same vein, and an interesting conversation about how stereotypes and our response to those stereotypes changes over time. So, in just a second we'll hear a conversation with the wonderful Lawrence Owen, but first let's hear his song, the opening number to Cine Musicals High, called Average High School Movie Day.
Bodacious audience members, welcome on this fine day to our little show. I'm the omniscient narrator, and I'm here to set the scene. You know one thing I really hate? Rules. And you know what has tons of rules? High school. And my high school has even more rules than most, because I go to Cine Musical High, where the rules are like totally inflexible, you know? But as the old saying goes, when life gives you lemons, play a guitar solo. Day. The rule is that if you're gonna fit in, you're gonna have to get clued up on who's who. Come on, let me show you around. So, we have jocks, nerds, prom queens, bad girls, and weirdos. So, over here, hanging by the football field, you got your jocks. Hey guys!
Fuck you!
Whoa, what a bunch of assholes. But you don't want to piss them off. or your head might find itself on the log flume to Toilet Flush Canyon. And the king of the jocks in this place, that's gotta be Hogan. Hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. Oh, you thought we were gonna shake hands, but then I moved my hand away before we could shake hands. You snooze, you lose, douchebag. Yeah, what a great guy. Next up, it's the prom queens. Hey, girls.
Fuck you.
Oh, they're so cool. They rule the school from their ivory towers, breaking hearts and spending all daddy's paychecks. And the queen of them all in this place, that's gotta be Princess Kira.
So, like, I Instagrammed my contouring tutorial, and, like, Cornelia, who's supposed to be, like, my BFF, said that it made me look like I was trying to hide in long grass or something. And then I was like, what does that even mean? And she was like, you totally look like a zebra, and not a hot one either. And I was like, oh my god, what a bitch!
Heading over to the science lab, we got your nerds. Hey, nerds!
Hey, diddly-ho.
Whether they're playing chess in the library or captaining the mathletes team, these guys will not be going to the prom. And the undisputed Big Chief Buffinmeister is Jeff.
Hello, Jeff here. Wonderful to meet you all. Excuse my distraction. I'm working on a science project, and it's a really very exciting thing. Hello, excuse me, is anyone listening? Hello? Hello? Dinosaurs? Dinosaurs?
Oh, he's adorable. He's such a nerd. Whoa, did it just get cold in here? Oh no, we just got a little closer to the weirdos. And the weirdest girl in school, Sadako. Okay, so she doesn't really say anything, but she lives in a well. And I heard she comes to school by crawling out of a TV. But you know, we all got our issues, whatever, that's cool. And last but not least, smoking behind the bike sheds, it's the bad girls. Tying cherry stems into knots with their tongues and leaving a trail of broken men behind them. And God, I wish I was one of them. And who is the high priestess of the illicit? Well, that would be May.
Hey, you handsome. How you doing? Me? No, I'm not a bad girl. I just have prominent secondary sexual characteristics. What can I say? Some kids develop zits. I developed well-rounded people skills.
From Monday through to Friday, from the moment they set foot on the driveway, minds get molded, kids get told it's the worst thing to be different. Hey, hey, this is how the game is played. Hey, hey, nothing's ever gonna change. Hey, hey, rules are meant to be obeyed. We're about to start another bitchy, sassy, fourth-wall breaking, social, microcosmic probing, maybe even Oscar baiting, average movie high school day.
It was certainly a lot harder to write this one. My wife Lindsay helped me a lot with this one. The first one all came together sort of reasonably quickly and fairly easily last year, which lulled me into a bit of a false sense of security. So it came to sort of September, and my wife and I had the idea, oh, why don't we try one that's like all set in one place? And we stumbled across the high school movie genre and thought, well, that's got every archetype you could possibly want.
Has it not? Yes.
Yeah, they're all there already. So we thought, okay, that would be a fun thing to do because there's scope for lots of different kinds of music, even though you're in one setting because you've got all these big characters. So we thought, brilliant, nailed it, and then did nothing for about 4 months.
A well-trodden path.
Yes. And then this show has been written and rewritten far more than the last one. So it's been a much more of a sort of battling process to get through to this one, and Lindsay's been totally invaluable with that. So we wrote the story together through many drafts, and then I made the music and lyrics once we've sort of figured it all out.
Well, it is the old thing about perspiration and inspiration then, isn't it?
I think
really?
so,
But
yeah.
If you don't mind me saying, what comes across on stage feels like it's been matured for years. I can't see any perforations, I can see no fraying at the edges, and I hope you won't mind me saying this, I think there might be something in it, because last year was a quest.
Yes.
There was a touch of the Wizard of somebody.
Yes.
Argue in some levels, you could also argue that the Wizard is not entirely far away from this one.
No.
That's just the nature of the beast sometimes.
No.
But it feels very cohesive. I mean, it may be that you've had to put extra work in, but in some senses that's come out, I was going to say the quality of the sausage coming out of the machine. I worry where this is going, but you understand what I'm trying to say.
I do understand.
It's a particularly good sausage.
It's a gorgeous metaphor.
It is, exactly.
Let's keep it.
Yes. I just wish I hadn't misfired halfway through. But it's a really good show. And
thank you.
But I've got several questions I hope you won't mind me asking.
Not at all.
Because you actually surprised me right at the beginning, because the references you gave me were references of college shows, films, things like that, from the 80s onwards. You make a specific reference to Ferris Bueller
Yes.
and his day off.
Mm-hmm.
And funnily enough, when I'd come in and from the title, I'd naturally been slightly more expecting High School Musical and its many, many, many sequels.
Do you know, that's an interesting thing, because I've had a couple of... That sort of didn't even really occur to me. And to my shame, I've never seen it.
Have you not?
I've never seen any of those films.
Well, if you want to know how the law of diminishing returns works,
Right,
I think
okay.
Disney have very kindly offered you an empirical experiment.
They
for you to
don't.
try.
They don't always get it right, do they?
Well, actually, in fairness, the first one, although it's a cynical exercise in some senses, it has a real joy to it.
Right.
Number 2 and number 3 are...
All right. Well, I'll watch
Aren't they?
I'll watch the first one.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. A few people have mentioned that to me, and in fact, somebody even said to me, sort of with some surprise, "Oh, you mean it's not anything to do with Disney?" Because
I think
thought. Yeah, because I think but maybe they'd seen the last one, or they'd seen me do some of my sort of Disney material, and naturally assumed that this would be what this one is. But I've never even seen it.
Have you noticed that in the demographic of your audience? Because actually, I mean, you obviously you've been getting everyone in from young and old, but there's a difference between the people who remember the 80s, 90s spurt of films, and then those people... Forgive me, the younger generation who would have seen the High School musicals and got into musical theatre that way, or musical films, who will be now about 25.
I'd say so, yeah.
Yeah, so have you been seeing a tendency in one direction or another?
I have been seeing a different demographic to last year. Last year, I actually got quite a lot of older audiences, sort of middle-aged and sort of retirement age audiences.
I fill in one of those categories, if I may say.
Well, because I think the thing with that is because it was a sort of golden age of cinema theme to the last one, with all these kind of lights, camera, action sort of thing. Whereas this one, it's very much like if you don't like high school musicals, you might pass over it. So I did wonder whether it was going to limit my audience, and it was a little quiet in the first week, and I did wonder whether I'd shot myself in the foot slightly, but thankfully it's really filled up. But
you were sold out. You were full up today.
I was definitely full up today, and in the last sort of week or so, it has been like that pretty much every day. But the demographic is different this year. It's much, much more varied. So I'm getting, like you say, young through to old.
I think that's good, really, isn't it?
I think so.
Because when the third one comes, or whatever's next for Lawrence Owen, hopefully you'll bring them all back in.
I hope so.
But there are some interesting tropes, it seems to me, and you can tell me I'm barking up the wrong tree here, but in the 80s films, the jocks were the villains. And it's a sign of where society has gone, and I don't know if it's better or worse, but the jock, or the Zac Efron character,
is now the
speech marks. And I'm ladling this with ironic speech marks if I can, the hero.
Yeah.
And you made such a good point. I mean, what I love is the theme of this, amongst other things, because once again, it's hilarious all the way through. It's a masterpiece of ingenuity and songwriting.
Oh,
but,
very kind, thank you.
Well, no, but it is. It's so simple for me to say, because you've actually presented me with the goods to judge.
Right.
But I judge happily because they were excellent. Yeah. So essentially we've had this change, and therefore people have got different expectations. I would expect the younger people expecting the Zac Efron style character to be the hero. Whereas my generation would see it the way you have seen it.
Yeah. Well, I think
much
it's
younger than I.
I think it's interesting. My sister helped me with the movement direction of it. She's a movement director and choreographer.
She's on the credits, isn't she?
She is. And she said, I think it's very interesting that you, sort of like middle-class arty kid, zoned in on the sporty ones as being the arseholes. And I think, that says more about me than I possibly intended. But yeah, I think because it was sort of based on the Breakfast Club type mould, That's why I ended up going like that, I think.
Musical talk. Well, that was Lawrence Owen. He is an undoubted talent and is worth catching for everything he does. And in speech marks real life, close speech marks, he's a composer of film music, an extremely accomplished man, and always worth talking to. Cine Musicals High, I gave 5 stars to. Hilarious and clever, a genuine gem of the Fringe. And if you want to go and see it, and you really should, it's a free show, which means getting there a little bit earlier, because you may have to queue. It's on at 1:45 in the afternoon, in the Voodoo Rooms in West Register Street, for an hour until the 28th of August. The Voodoo Rooms are a well-known cabaret venue, not very far at all from the John Lewis. Well, from one one-man show to a four-hander, a charming light character comedy, which I enjoyed immensely. It was called Like Clockwork, and so I caught up with the charming Dominic Howlett to talk about the show, its story, and its characters. So let's hear some of that now. Musical talk. So when did the idea come about for Like Clockwork? It's a very particular piece, isn't it?
It's odd, isn't it?
Yeah, but good odd.
Oh, thank you. Essentially, we were looking around Fringe. We were like, oh, there's all this wonderful, quirky stuff.
Yes.
It's fantastic. And we were like, oh, we want to do something in that vein, in that sort of ilk. But we know that there's a lot of shows out there that aren't necessarily suitable for children or aren't suitable for different... And we were like, no, let's make the most inclusive show we possibly can. So it's literally open to anyone. It's family-friendly. And we were like, we wanted to keep that wackiness, but give it to the masses, essentially.
It's sprightly, I think, is the best term for it in a way, actually. That is meant absolutely as a compliment.
Good.
So do you want to briefly explain the plot? At least without giving anything away.
Yeah, it's quite an odd plot to explain. Essentially...
Yes, that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah. Essentially, there's this girl called Grace, and she lives in this very messy, very untidy apartment with her flatmate Joe, who is the cause of all the mess.
Yeah, it's a bit like The Odd Couple in that sense, isn't it? One neat, one untidy, but it's cleverer than that. So go on.
And basically, she has this aunt who you never actually see, but she used to talk to herself, and she was clearly the subject of much discussion among her friends and family. And she sadly dies and leaves Grace, her best friend, who, as it transpires, is a magical talking clock.
And, why wouldn't that be the case?
Exactly. And so, essentially, the clock comes along, and he just tries to help out Grace, sort out her life, and
If we like, it taps into actually a long tradition of storytelling, which is either the invisible friend, we have Harvey, the invisible rabbit, and all that kind of stuff.
I love Harvey.
Yes. Or Jiminy Cricket in Pinocchio. There's this kind of almost the unseen voice on the shoulder. So are these, would you say these are influences? Or would you...
definitely. Especially stuff like Aladdin as well is another sort of famous story where you've got this magical companion that kind of comes along and helps out. It's a nice little story, and it's nice to sort of try and find a fresh take on that idea.
And you can make the invisible character as strange or as wonderful and as weird or as wacky as you like, can't you, as well? Because, in fact, that adds to the comedy element. I mean, let's be honest, this is a comedy.
Yes.
As you say, it's a very easy access. I mean that in a very positive sense, easy access comedy. So, yes, there's nothing to offend anybody.
No.
But actually, it's got its own little... it has its rhythm, if I may say. What's lovely about it is, almost immediately, I think, as an audience, you get the tone. And once you've got that tone, you know precisely what you're in for. We're not looking at deep insights into the human psyche here. I hope I don't in any way underplay what you're saying. But what you do get, a little world and a little episode within that world, which is then played out for the good because of the wackiness of, if you like, the fourth character in the room, in this case, this talking clock. But I quite like the characters as delineated. So let's talk about the central characters first.
Okay.
By which I mean the flat sharers.
Yes.
So, in many ways, the person who owns the flat,
Grace,
is almost the everyman.
Yes.
She's the most normal person in the room, and the lodestone around which all the adventures occur, in a way, isn't it? I mean, that's a traditional thing. But you've avoided making her a cipher, because she has an I want, and she has a character of her own. I also like the fact that, she opens with a song about how
mildly irritated she is about the messiness of her flatmate, although she loves him and adores him.
Yeah.
That undersells it, actually. You know, it's an affectionate... I mean, she does love him, but it's there's a huge amount of affection.
Oh, definitely,
And you
yeah.
can see they're mates, actually. You can sort of see that immediately.
They actually shared, funnily enough, the actors, when they were preparing for the roles, actually shared an apartment together.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
And do they turn out to be Mr. and Mrs. Messy or tidy? Or?
I don't know. I never
How
actually...
method were they?
Yeah, I don't know.
Fine. Oh, that's very interesting, absolutely. And then you've got Joe.
Yep.
Who is a little bit put upon, really. He's I think you'd have to call him as a sort of charming... I'm not going to call him an underdog, because actually he's his own man, but he's easily put upon. I'd say the actor gives him a great deal of energy. He's very
he's wonderful,
very
isn't
light
he?
on his feet. So much energy, and there's that where he jumps up and down, and he does pratfalls, and he's a bit of a... You can't sort of take your eye off him when he's running around. Actually, he's
It's fantastic. Isn't it? We actually wrote the... he sings a song called... well, we just call it the law song, actually.
Yeah.
And it's essentially where he's putting his law degree on trial for crimes against humanity. And we actually wrote that song after we knew he was playing the part.
Oh, so it's tailored for him.
Yeah.
Because he flips from what the prosecution to the defence to the judge in very broad brush ways to delineate it within the story of that particular song in its own right. But he acts it all out as well. He's bouncing around the stage. The complete opposite of what a court would be, in fact. It's very, it's not a stately, formal environment, is it? So
which is probably why he wouldn't make a very good lawyer in the end.
Yes, well, that's true, and he is saved from that. I hope I'm not ruining anything by saying that. And then we have Pym.
Pym.
A very unusual name. Now, do tell me that Pym is a real name and not just being used to rhyme with...
not
for a
just,
rhyme.
Yes, she's perfectly proper and perfectly prim, perfectly pretty and perfect for him is the rhyme that we said. No, Pym was named after... I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. The drink, Pym's.
Oh, yes, of course you're allowed to say it. We're an independent podcast.
Oh,
absolutely.
wonderful.
They may even send you a bottle. Who knows?
But essentially, we were trying to find her character completely... I don't know if you ever read them, the Jess Williams stories.
Oh, by Richmond Crompton.
Yeah.
Yonks ago, yes, absolutely.
And she was... there was a character called Violet Elizabeth that I just absolutely adored as a child.
Spoilt brat.
The
epitome of the spoilt
brat,
in fact.
Yes, she'd do that wonderful thing where she'd go, I'll scream and scream and scream until I'm sick, and I can, And I was just... I thought
that's
that
her
was...
grown up, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's inevitably what she'd be if...
And she's possibly the least pleasant person in the cast, isn't she? In terms of character.
Yeah.
Not as an actress,
No,
obviously.
she's lovely.
Quite right.
Yeah.
But because, she's picked Joe because she sees potential for high earning in him.
Yes.
So it's not really a love match at all,
No.
is it? In fact, you almost wonder how they got together.
I wonder that every day.
But she's supposed to be... Well, she is a very attractive woman, so I suppose there are payoffs.
Yes.
If that's your bag, absolutely. And then, of course, we get down to the clock. Or time itself.
Time itself, the physical embodiment of time itself, yeah.
Now, what I like about the actor playing him is the fact he brings a very different level of energy and a very different kind of comedy. The way he's written, or it seems to me, is that he's... he can't decide. It's pathetic comedy, isn't it, with the B, in the sense that sometimes he's this grandiose, august, slightly pompous, I am the embodiment of time.
Yeah.
And then he'll immediately slip into, I've fallen off a beanbag kind of thing. And that actually is the Kenneth Williams school of acting.
Oh, really?
In Carry On films, there's a great deal of, I am the august character. Oh, but look at that. Oh, slipped over. That kind of thing. I love that kind of performance. I love that. And he's a man, he's a bigger man. He plays a big character. He puts in the boom, and then he sort of completely pulls the rug away from himself. And that's such a comic trick. It's such a clever thing to do. But it's a very different energy to, say, Joe's sort of bounce around energy. You have Grace's sort of demure suffering, if you like, and Pym's imperiosity, I suspect, is probably the best way of putting it. So that's quite an interesting... It's a four-hander, isn't it, in that sense? And so all the comedy plays off it. So it's actually a good character comedy in that sense.
It all comes from stuff that I loved as a child. So I always loved... the pompousness, I loved Dad's Army. And so it was Mannering, and it was that pompous kind of thing, and that's where we kind of got that from. There's also a little reference...
Because you can be lovably pompous as well, can't you?
Yeah.
That's quite a hard trick again.
And then there's like a reference to my favourite book that was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I don't know if you picked up on that. There's in some of the lines he says, and it's just all like coming together of everything I love. And
it's a fusion of
together.
cultural references. I like that. Yes, absolutely. Although some of them are more subtly hidden than others,
Yes,
if I may say.
yeah.
Of course, yeah. Because it's an original piece in its own right. I mean, you mustn't undersell yourself. I mean, we're all the sum of our cultural references. But actually, as I say, sprightly and buoyant is where it goes. So.
Musical talk. There we are, that was the lovely Dominic Howlett talking about his excellent show Like Clockwork. That's on until the 27th of August, and you can see it at 12:50 in the afternoon at The Space at Surgeons Hall. I gave it 4 stars, and I called it sprightly, accessible and fun, a charming comedy for everyone. Well, we're getting towards the end of this programme. I hope you've enjoyed hearing just some of the tastes and flavours, sounds and ideas behind the shows which particularly took my fancy at this year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe. Don't forget there were many, many more shows which I didn't get to see, or that I wasn't able to talk about, or conduct interviews with the people behind them. And of course, my experiences of the Edinburgh Fringe wouldn't be your experiences of the Edinburgh Fringe. There's a pathway for everyone. However, it is traditional for Musical Talk to select a pick of the Fringe, and this year is no exception. My favourite show may not be your favourite show, but I certainly think this show in particular has some merits which for me marked it out as my favourite show of the year. It was one of only 2 shows that I saw twice, which is always a good sign, and it was called Royal Vauxhall. Now, that title might not tell you everything you need to know, but a thumbnail sketch of the plot is that it's based on an allegedly true story that in the late 1980s, Freddie Mercury and Kenny Everett took Princess Diana, then married to Prince Charles, the heir to the British throne, to the Royal Vauxhall Tavern, a gay bar in Vauxhall in South London, for a night out in disguise. And if that's not a juicy idea for a plot, I don't know what isn't. I like this show so much that I spoke to several people about it. So what you're going to hear now will be a brief extract from the conversation I had with Tom Giles, who's a lovely man and who plays Freddie Mercury, a brief extract from the conversation I had with Sarah Louise Young, who's a famous cabaret performer as well as an actress, and we'll be talking briefly about her involvement in this show as Princess Diana and the 2 other cabarets that she's performing in Edinburgh and which you can still see, a remarkable woman with remarkable energy. And then to complete the trilogy, if you like, on Royal Vauxhall, we'll talk to the man behind it, Desmond O'Connor. 3 for the price of 1. And all for Musical Talk's 2016 pick of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, Royal Vauxhall. Let's start with Tom Giles. Musical Talk.
Okay, so I'm Tom Giles and I'm playing Freddie Mercury in Royal Vauxhall this summer in Edinburgh.
Now, the thing about performing in a play where you're being asked to take on the role of someone who's not just, or has just been a real person, but is known to everyone, who is an icon.
Yeah.
I suppose the thing I've got to ask you first is that daunting? Is that a challenge? And how do you as an actor work out how you're going to do that? Because there are different directions you can take it in, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. It was very exciting and very flattering, of course, because he's such an icon, as you say, and such an extraordinary performer and personality. It was sort of implicit in the script that we needed to discover and find a way of showing Freddie as a human being, not a personality or a caricature. And there are hours and hours and hours of documentary footage of him performing, but there's not a lot of him being domestic, or of course, because off the stage and off the record, as it were. And he loathed interviews, famously. So he was very shut down in interviews, or he was pretty rude.
Oh.
And so I didn't want to do that, because the more documentary footage you find, there are tiny little nuggets. For example, his close circle of gay friends called him Mother Mercury.
I've heard this.
Yeah, they called him Mother Mercury, and he had female names for all of his close friends. So Wayne Sleep was Bridget the Midget. And yes, absolutely, what a sweetheart. And his personal assistant was Phoebe, and I forget some of the others. But so I think he was quite mother hen, and he would, help people out financially or practically or logistically, and he would move things around. He was godfather to loads of children and very, very devoted. And there's tiny clips online of him with one of his godchildren, and it's so sweet. It's so sweet, and not about him. It's not all about him, which was lovely to see. And the thing that I was most interested in was that.
And I think, and I hope you won't mind me saying, I think you've made a very good acting choice. I mean, I think you perform the part brilliantly.
Thank you.
But you evoke Freddie Mercury rather than impersonate Freddie Mercury.
Yes.
And I think that's important, because there are some shows where a closer impersonation helps. There's a Charles Hawtrey thing up here called Oh Hello at the moment, and he does the voice and the mannerisms.
Sure.
And is attempting an embodiment. And that works really well in that context as a one-man show.
Yeah.
Here, this is a dramatic narrative. You are here as an actor, you're employed as an actor.
Yeah.
So you've taken the evocation route. Did you find it easy to straddle that line?
I was terrified, to be honest.
Really?
Yes, about it, and our director. Nothing like an interview in a bar. So our director Lucy Ray, who was very supportive of the process and discovering that way of interpreting the part, and the writer Des, who I believe you've spoken to already. They were They were very interested in finding the truth of the play and Freddie's arc through it, and it was that I tried to use as a guide. So not to worry about sounding too much like him or finding too many mannerisms, because there aren't those off-the-record things to impersonate, as it were. And I do a big song, which is supposed to be a kind of Freddie-esque, but he was such a specific shaped man. Like, he had that massive overbite.
Yes, he did.
And all of those teeth is going to make you sing in a very specific way. He didn't have a lot of vocal training, and he also didn't give a fuck. He didn't really look after his voice. Although there are lots of interviews where people are like, oh, he got better and better and better and better. And sure, he was an astonishing performer, but he had really bad nodules by the time he was in his 40s. And
it's the experience overtook his abilities in a way.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that performers always evolve in a certain way and in a certain direction, but yeah, he was not a flawless performer by any means. And so I just sort of thought, we just have to embrace what this human being is going through and what this human story is and tell that.
But, if you don't mind me saying, you have pots of talent, but you spread it around, if you don't mind me saying.
I'm
because you have
terrible.
at least 3 shows up here in Edinburgh,
Yes.
and a lot of guest spots. I keep seeing your name here, there and everywhere, in various combinations.
Yes, the plan was only ever to take 2 shows. So Michael Ralston and I have been writing together for 10 years.
Yes.
And we usually done character work, and we've had a show called Cabaret Hall, which did 4 years, and then we decided to take one character for the whole Fringe, which was my French chanteuse La Poule Plombée, which is where we are now, which is where, hence the makeup, the red nails for La Poule. And then we decided, so I was going to do La Poule and Showstopper. Showstopper shifted their time, so they clashed, and we thought, well, let's do 2. Let's bring both our workers, Ralston and Young, as ourselves with no makeup and wigs. Some makeup, no wigs. And so that was the plan. But because I was lucky enough to do an early workshop version of Raw Vauxhall earlier in the year, and Des said, did you want to do it? And I thought, I'm not going to let anyone else play that part.
No.
So it's 3 shows a day. It's 3:15, 6:30 and 10:10, plus guest spots at midnight. But I'm really enjoying it. The only sadness is I don't get to see many shows. I did yesterday. We went to see Daniel Kaner at lunchtime, who I adore and is always wonderful. So yeah, it's tiring, but it's also what we're here for. I mean, Edinburgh is a trade fair, but it's also a chance to connect and see your friends. And
it is all of that. It's a wonderful bubble, isn't it? But you can so easily bump into people you know, and deliberately see people you know, and make new friends as well. I mean, it's a great networking opportunity.
Well, we've been doing a lot of Lily Liscala's late night shows, and that's when I get to see my friends. So, but it is. It takes me about a week to shift into Edinburgh time, going to bed at 3 a.m. and we do 2 hours of admin in the morning. Cutting, stapling, because I'm producing 2 of the shows as well.
Good Lord, really?
Yes.
Oh, what is your secret? Because you have eternal energy, it seems, and eternal youth.
I actually don't have eternal energy, but I think I'm very good at knowing how to conserve it. I'm very careful with my voice. I never drink alcohol while I'm up here. Well, apart from the alcohol that I drink during the show, do occasionally have a few sips of people's wine. I just take it very seriously, because this is a very expensive and high-profile place for a month. Now, that's where my tired. Actually, I'm great on stage. Between shows, I'm a little bit blurry, stringing sentences together. So it's important for us to get this month right, because it affects the rest of the year that comes after it.
Yes, in a way, it's almost it's the linchpin for a whole series of things, isn't it? Because things come to Edinburgh and they move on as well. So just make sure we know what your shows are.
Yes.
Let's just delineate what they are. As you've got through, we might as well go through
So
them.
3:15 is called Ralston and Young, Songs for Lovers and Other Idiots, and that's an hour of musical comedy, all original songs. And then at 6:30 is called Cabaret Hall Presents La Poule Plombée, and that's the Voodoo Rooms, and that's our crazy French character. And then Royal Vauxhall is at 10:10.
So you're shifting characters as well, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
so much of what you're doing is, funny enough, is acting as well. You know, the cabaret and acting have a huge overlap.
I approach everything as an actor.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Completely, because you're always looking for the truth. The only difference with cabaret is your audience is part of the story. So for me, an audience should hopefully feel by the end of the show that their participation has made part of the show. And that doesn't mean they've necessarily spoken to you or the script has changed, but their response in the room is what makes the show. So you're seeking connection always throughout the piece. And that's why I love it. And in a way, Royal Vauxhall is a lovely addition to that, because we are allowed to connect with the audience. But I don't see any difference in the truth of playing the part. The truth comes first.
Musical talk.
So my name is Desmond O'Connor. I'm the writer, composer, lyricist of Royal Vauxhall, the musical about the night that Freddie Mercury and Kenny Everett took Princess Diana in disguise, in drag, to a gay pub in London.
Which is a fantastic premise for a show. So let's talk about the book first of all. I mean, forgive me, this is a sort of an urban myth, isn't it?
Well, I'm assured that it's a true story. It
My
was
source is close to the palace.
Yeah, I mean, I read the story in the paper a few years ago. No, so about a year and a half ago now. It was, of course, famously retold by Cleo Ruckus in her autobiography,
Yes.
The Art of Positive Drinking. And
She's Kenny Everett's close friend.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, very dear friend of Kenny. And so that was kind of all over the press in London. I think I read it in the Standard or Metro and was just intrigued by the story when I read it. So I'm kind of, at the time I remember thinking it's sort of such a preposterous story that it must be true, because you wouldn't make up something that was so ridiculous and so implausible. And the whole framing of it, they were sitting watching the Golden Girls and suddenly decided, let's go out. So I kind of knew the moment that I read the story that I had to do something with it, even if it was something frivolous and fun and just a kind of big gay musical, which I think was my thought at the time. And then inevitably, when you start to scratch the surface and start to think about the people involved and the moment in their lives, I started to realise there was a much bigger story to be told.
Slightly darker one as well.
Slightly darker, and I guess it's always interesting when something pricks your consciousness as a writer. It tends to happen in quite I think Bob Dylan does it. It tells a great story about sort of the inspiration sort of flying over him, or the genius flying over him, and that sort of tends to be the way that an idea arrives. And you're not always aware of why something has appealed to you. And it was only when I started to think about the telling of the story that I kind of realised, that the characters were so vitally important to me and was such a huge part of my life in the 80s, which I'm sure we'll talk more about.
I rather hope we will.
And then there was a very important political aspect, because it just happened that sort of a short while after reading the story, I was guest hosting a club called Bar Whatever at the Royal Vauxhall Tavern. Now that is one of the most brilliantly Catholic with a small c, all-inclusive. It's an LGBTQ XYZ night, but really the doors are open to absolutely anybody who needs
I am aware of the door.
It's not that kind of club, but it's very much about having a totally safe, all-inclusive space for anyone who I think for one reason or another might be made to feel that they don't belong, to say, well, you do, you belong here. And so it was a phenomenal honour to be asked by Ingo to come and guest host that club for a month. And while I was doing that, we suddenly started losing all these iconic venues in London. So we lost the Joiners Arms, we lost Madame Jojo's, we lost the Black Cap. We were about to lose the Royal Vauxhall Tavern.
I know, there was a big thing about that about a year ago.
Yeah, exactly. And that was sort of the genesis of this show, because I kind of realised I'm not part of the LGBT community, but I've always felt very closely aligned to it.
You're a close friend.
Exactly, yeah. Through my work in cabaret and through all of my friends and colleagues. And I think that we had suddenly accidentally arrived at a time where we thought, well, suddenly gay rights are top of the agenda, and we've got gay marriage, and suddenly it's a very safe and accepting world in which to be gay.
It's a better world.
A better world, but not. I don't think we're anywhere near the end of the journey.
It's not the best way. Yes.
No,
if
definitely.
We're talking comparatives
and it's
superlatives. Yes.
Exactly, and I think that's something that was communicated to me brilliantly when I was still a teacher. When a gay colleague got married to his husband, and was fantastically proud and fantastically excited. And still, when one of the parents at the school asked him, it was sort of noticed he was married, and asked about his wife, and he didn't correct, and he said, he just felt so conflicted about that. And I think that that's still the true story for a lot of gay men and women in England, that yes, okay, your rights are equal technically to everybody else, but it's not an equal world.
No, I'm always being asked about my wife and children, who are invisible. So
live in Canada. So sorry, maybe sort of gone off piece there slightly, but the
no, but I think it's good contextual stuff because it's absolutely true. And but even though we do live in a much better world, we forget actually how grim I was there in 1988, and it was a grim, in many ways, frightening place.
Yeah,
and even the top of society, at least in show business, well, in fact, literally, in terms of royalty, if you look at the world in that hierarchical way, were forced into enclosures, by which I mean social enclosures, I don't mean literal ones.
Yeah.
So yes, it was a dark and dangerous time, and we forget that.
Yeah.
Because I have a lot of younger gay friends, and bless them, they know intellectually what it was like, but they don't know what it was like.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like a boring old fart, but
I don't know. I don't think that does at all sound like that. And I think that venues, certainly at the time that the show is set, venues like the Royal Vauxhall Tavern were just of fundamental importance to the community, as you say, on every social strata. And it would be very easy to believe that, it's fine, we don't need places like that anymore. Well, I would say try telling that to the trans teenager who's been ostracised or beaten up or bullied or hassled and harangued by every single person that they know, and they need somewhere that they can go to feel safe. And that person, to my mind, is in exactly the same boat as the world-famous rock star who needs somewhere they can go to feel safe. As the high-paid television comedian who needs somewhere that they can go and be themselves. And indeed, yes, even the wife of the heir to the throne just needs somewhere she can be herself for a night. And that's really where Royal Vauxhall was born, of that need for a place that we can be ourselves.
So, but immediately, that you mentioned the word frivolous at the beginning, but absolutely everything you've said there is not frivolous in any way at all. However, what you do straddle so perfectly in the piece, if I may say, is that mixture of light frivolity and zaniness of three friends actually having a night in.
Yeah.
And that's really important because you feel the connection between them. And the difficulty, and because it's a play like any other play or a musical, that as good drama, something happens and then things can get darker, and they do get darker, and also things are revealed inadvertently, bad things. Not everyone comes out of it with an enhanced reputation. Maybe the best way of putting it. So we have but that's good drama. It's a well-written book, but it has its lightness, and it needs that lightness. And actually, I'm going to be honest, Kenny Everett of the three of the triptych is the one that I have the closest connection to.
Yeah.
Such an important part of my teenage life. And I've sort of carried him ever since, even though he's now starting to be forgotten in some circles, which is a sad thing.
It's a really sad thing. I guess there's a couple of things there that I would immediately pick up on that you said in terms of the lightness and the frivolity of the script and the music, and the reason it had to be a musical and not a play is that, really lightness and frivolity and music and dancing are the things that we use to steer us through the darkness. Yes. And so therefore, as part of my creative palette, they're always there. And, whether I'm writing musicals about the anti-terror laws, as I have, or the banking crisis, music's a really central part of delivering a much deeper, darker theme. But then also, Kenny Everett. And it's just heartbreaking that, when I stand on the Royal Mile flyering for the show, as I do, because I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty to promote a show. Or wet.
If the day requires it.
It's all wet and dirty, but we're going down a whole different line there.
My penny has just dropped, but thank you for offering it.
But, Kenny Everett is the person who I need to describe to people and explain to people. And even in the show, the very first sort of drafts that we did, I had, very well-respected colleagues coming up to me and saying, so who was this other guy? I don't really know who you're talking. I didn't listen to the radio back then. It's like, well, he was only the most influential DJ of the country of the era and the most influential TV personality.
Modern radio goes back to Kenny.
I think, on really radio you wouldn't have Steve Wright. On TV you would never have had the young ones. You would never have had Friday Night Live. The whole wave of alternative British comedy was thanks to people like Kenny Everett. But I think really he was the person who spearheaded it.
Well, the video cassette in the 70s on ITV before even he got onto the BBC.
Yeah. But he destroyed his career and he destroyed himself because, as I have said on more than one occasion, in the 1980s every little boy in the country wanted to be Kenny Everett, apart from Kenny Everett.
Yes. it's that almost self-loathing thing going on,
Yeah.
isn't it? Which was, we forget that's a big important. Well, it was important, regrettable, but important, or an often regular part of being a gay man in that period. Because so many people who were out, even out people, didn't always want to be out. In fact, most didn't, because society was so difficult and awkward.
And even the people that we celebrated on television, I'm thinking about the sort of John Inmans of the era, and the Kenneth Williams, Frankie Howard, all those people that were very, what we would identify now as very obviously gay men, were not openly gay men. Well, because of course for the majority of their careers it was illegal. When Kenny Everett rose to fame, it was only just legal in this country.
It certainly wasn't accepted.
It was certainly not accepted. So we love these people. It's kind of highlighted in one of the songs. We love these people to be flamboyant and camp and outrageous and over the top, but we don't like to think about what they do in their bed when they go home. Yeah,
and so much of the show thematically is about imagery and protective imagery and the ability to trust someone enough to remove that. And then, of course, whether you can trust those people in the way that you think you can, which of course is explored.
Indeed.
Very nicely and subtly, actually, because it's none of the actions. I'm not going to explain how it develops and what happens necessarily, but I don't want to ruin it for anyone who I hope is going to go and see it.
Mm-hmm.
But people are driven by different needs: panic, fear of exposure. I mean, that still exists today for different reasons. Sometimes the same reason, in fairness, but that makes people do terrible things, or it can make people do terrible things, and these things are explored. So I think, as I say, I go back to this wonderful balance of boom in your face, isn't this funny, zany, to use a Kenny phrase, zany comedy, and a real subtle investigation into what trapped people do, because they're all trapped in their own way, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to give away too much about the structure of the piece, because I think it's important, but there is there's almost a kind of Wicklow purgatorial kind of setting to the whole thing, that, whilst the show is set in Chelsea and then later in Vauxhall, it could just as easily be set in purgatory and or heaven / hell.
So, Mr. Dante, any thoughts on finishing it? No.
Musical talk. Well, there we are. You heard in chronological order Tom Giles, Sarah Louise Young and Desmond O'Connor. I gave that show 5 stars, called it a hilarious, touching and subtle gem, great on every level. And of course, it is, as I say, our pick of the Fringe for this year. And if you want to go and see it, please do. It's on at 10:10 in the evening at Underbelly Med Quad in Teviot Place, just off Bristow Square. It runs for an hour and 15 minutes, and it carries on until the 29th of August. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is this week's episode of Musical Talk. Remember, everything we've discussed in today's episode is available for you still to see. So if you're heading anywhere near Edinburgh in the next week or so, right up until the bank holiday, until the 29th, then please do try and catch a few shows, even if they're not these ones. And remember, these extracts can be heard in their full version over the next few weeks here on Musical Talk, and so can too some interviews that we haven't included today because those shows have already closed. So we'll be talking, for example, about Merrily We Roll Along by Stephen Sondheim, which I also saw up here, not to mention many, many other shows. But let's finish today's episode in a very similar way to the way that we began it, with a song from that piece of new writing called Stop the Train by Rick Gard. This song is called We All Fall Down. And before we hear that, there's just time for me to say goodbye from Edinburgh and goodbye from me. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Sleep well, my friend. Farewell to beginnings. Hello to the end. Sail away now. Let your journey begin. One gate closes and another lets you in. One sun sets and another will rise. Nothing ever happens but constant surprise. Wipe those tears from your Goodbye, yesterday's gone. We'll pick up the pieces and soldier on. Don't cry, tomorrow will come. Darkness will yield to the light of the sun. When we all fall down, we all fall down. There's no use complaining, memories remain in your mind. So I say goodbye, yesterday's gone. We'll pick up the pieces and soldier on, and pray there's souls to be free, as I'd hope for you and you'd hope for me. When we all fall down, we all fall down. These are the moments we search for the strength to survive. So I say goodbye, but never forget those that we've lost, we've cherished or met. Don't cry, tomorrow will come. Darkness will yield to the light of the sun. Sing with one strong voice, one strong voice. No use complaining, memories remain in your mind. So I say goodbye, yesterday's gone. We'll pick up the pieces and soldier on, and pray there's souls to be free, as I'd hope for you and you'd hope for me. Goodbye, yesterday's gone. We'll pick up the pieces and soldier on, and pray there's souls to be free, as I'd hope for you and you'd hope for me. Goodbye, yesterday's gone. We'll pick up the pieces and soldier on. Don't cry, tomorrow will come. Darkness will yield to the light of the sun. Darkness will yield to the light of the sun.
This episode of Musical Talk edited and presented by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2016, except for the songs where the copyright remains with the original writers. And my thanks go to all of them for allowing me to play their songs in this episode. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk and listen to past episodes, go along to our brand new website, musicaltalkpodcast.weebly.com. Or subscribe to us on iTunes. And follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can, at Musical Talk Thos.